Jet Robertson was just 18 years old when his life was tragically cut short. A senior at Bridgerton High School in Bridgerton, Missouri, a quiet suburb of St. Louis, Jet was known for his love of bicycles and spent much of his free time working on them in the garage or riding around town. He was the kind of kid who was always ready to lend a helping hand, whether it was fixing a neighbor's flat tire or volunteering at local events like the Bridgerton Fall Festival. Jet was also known for his easygoing personality. He was the friend who could always be counted on to keep a secret or to share a laugh during tough times. Jet's life had taken a difficult turn earlier that year when his father died suddenly of a heart attack. The loss hit him hard, leaving a void that no one could quite fill. His step-grandmother, Nancy Robertson McClear, became his main source of comfort during this period. Nancy had been a constant presence in Jet's life, partially raising him after his mother, Bridezilla Cantora, left the family when he was just 14 years old. With his mother gone and his father now deceased, Jet turned to Nancy for emotional support. She was always there with a listening ear and a warm hug, making Jet feel like he wasn't alone. Jet had dreams of leaving Bridgerton after graduation. He often talked about moving to the relatively glamorous Kansas City, where he hoped to find work as a bicycle mechanic and eventually open his own shop. His friends and teachers described him as hardworking and full of potential. He was even saving up for a trip to Chicago, something he'd wanted to do since he was a child. In the days before his death, Jet was focused on his future, excited about the prospect of leaving his small-town life behind. He was also preparing for Halloween, planning to dress up as Nancy from Stranger Things, one of his favorite TV shows. However, beneath the surface, there was a dark secret that no one could have predicted, a secret that would soon lead to his tragic and untimely death. On the morning of October 28, 2020, Bridgerton was waking up to a crisp fall day, with pumpkins on doorsteps and political signs lining the streets as the contentious 2020 election neared. At around 8:00 a.m., Kevin Robertson, Jet's stepfather, made a shocking discovery. Kevin had been planning to head out early to his construction job, but noticed that Jet's usual morning routine seemed off. Jet hadn't come inside for breakfast, which was unusual since he was always up early, often tinkering in the garage before school. When Kevin went to check on him, he found the garage door slightly ajar. Inside, Kevin was met with a horrific sight. Jet's lifeless body lay crumpled on the cold concrete floor. The teenager's head was bloodied, and beside him was the wrench that had once been a trusted tool in Jet's hands but was now stained with blood. Kevin's heart pounded as he stood frozen, trying to process the scene in front of him. The shock quickly turned to panic. Kevin rushed inside the house and grabbed his phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. His voice was frantic as he told the operator about the terrible scene in the garage. Kevin's reaction was one of sheer terror. He had never expected to find his stepson like this. He paced back and forth in the driveway, looking up and down the street as if hoping to wake up from a bad dream. Within minutes, the Bridgerton Police Department arrived at the scene. Officers quickly secured the area, taking off the garage and driveway as neighbors began to gather, curious and concerned. The news of Jet's death spread quickly through the tight-knit community. Many residents were glued to their TVs, watching politically charged coverage of the upcoming election, when they got word of the tragic event unfolding just down the street. As paramedics arrived and confirmed Jet's death, Kevin was left in a state of disbelief, sitting on the curb with his head in his hands. He kept repeating, "Why would someone do this?" as officers tried to calm him down. The small suburban town of Bridgerton, known for sharing a name with the popular Netflix series Love, bisexually frustrated women everywhere, was suddenly thrust into a nightmare that would soon reveal more darkness than anyone could have imagined. The Bridgerton Police Department responded quickly to the call, arriving at the Robertson home around 8:15 a.m. on October 28, 2020. Officer James Delgado, a 12-year veteran of the force, led the team. Known for his calm demeanor and sharp investigative skills, Delgado had seen his share of crime scenes, but nothing quite like this in the peaceful town of Bridgerton. The garage where Jet's body was found was a small, cluttered space filled with the typical tools and gadgets of an 18-year-old who loved working on bicycles. The scene was eerily quiet, except for the occasional hum of a distant lawnmower or the chirping of birds. The concrete floor, usually dusty and scattered with bike parts, was now marred by a pool of dark, dried blood. The wrench, a heavy tool from Jet's own toolbox, lay beside him, its weight and size making it clear that it was the weapon used to bludgeon him to death. As Officer Delgado and his team began their investigation, they methodically documented the scene. Photographs were taken from every angle, capturing the blood splatter on the floor and walls, the position of Jet's body, and the wrench that delivered the fatal blows. The police carefully bagged the wrench as evidence, noting the bloodstains and any potential fingerprints. They also collected samples from the blood pool and any other traces that might help identify the killer. The crime scene itself was a disturbing contrast, both clean and brutal. There was no sign of a struggle, suggesting that Jet had been caught off guard. The orderly state of the garage made the violent act even more shocking. The team's focus was on finding any clues that might point to the perpetrator: footprints, fibers, anything out of place. As the investigation continued, Delgado couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random act of violence. The use of Jet's own tool as the murder weapon suggested a level of familiarity between the victim and the killer. The fact that there were no signs of forced entry or robbery led the police to believe that Jet's killer was someone he knew well, someone who had been in the garage with him before everything went wrong. By the end of the day, the crime scene was thoroughly calmed over, but the mystery was only beginning to unravel. The next step would be to question those closest to Jet, as the police started to piece together the events that led to this gruesome murder. The first person the police turned their attention to was Nancy Robertson McClear, Jet's 74-year-old step-grandmother. Nancy was well known in Bridgerton as a retired school teacher who had spent decades educating the town's children. With her silver hair and gentle smile, she was the picture of a sweet, nurturing grandmother. However, the police couldn't ignore the whispers of her unusually close relationship with Jet, a relationship that had raised more than a few eyebrows among those who knew the family. Nancy had partially raised Jet after his father's sudden death, and the two had grown close in the years since. But close didn't begin to describe the reality of their bond. The police soon learned that Nancy and Jet had been involved in a secret sexual relationship, a fact that shocked even the most seasoned investigators. This discovery cast Nancy in a whole new light and made her a prime suspect in the murder. When questioned by the police, Nancy was initially cooperative. She appeared calm, sitting in her cozy living room surrounded by family photos and the faint scent of vanilla candles. She spoke fondly of Jet, describing him as a loving grandson who had been a source of comfort for her after her husband's death. But as the questions grew more pointed, Nancy's demeanor began to shift. She became more defensive, her answers shorter and less detailed. When asked about her whereabouts on the morning of October 28, Nancy claimed she had been at home, preparing for a quiet day of reading and knitting. Despite her calm exterior, the police noticed that Nancy's hands were trembling slightly, and her eyes darted nervously around the room. They pressed her on the nature of her relationship with Jet, and while she denied anything inappropriate, the investigators weren't convinced. The wrench used to kill Jet was from his own toolbox, a detail that suggested the killer had access to his belongings, someone who knew him well enough to be in his private space without raising suspicion. Nancy's possible motive became clearer as the investigation progressed. It appeared that Jet had recently tried to end their sexual relationship, possibly out of guilt or fear of being discovered. This rejection may have driven Nancy to commit the unthinkable. The idea of losing Jet, her sexual outlet, combined with the possibility of their frankly disgusting secret being exposed, could have pushed her over the edge. As the police wrapped up their initial questioning, Nancy remained a person of interest. Her calm demeanor, while initially convincing, now seemed more like a mask hiding deeper emotions that might have led her to murder the very person she claimed to love. Kevin Robertson, Jet's 46-year-old stepfather, was the second suspect the police looked into. Kevin was a construction foreman, known around Bridgerton for his tough, no-nonsense attitude. He had a gruff exterior, often seen wearing a worn-out Carhartt jacket and steel-toed boots. Kevin was a man of few words, preferring to let his work do the talking. He had spent years in the construction business, building homes and managing crews, but his relationship with Jet, it had always been rocky. The tension between Kevin and Jet wasn't a secret. People in town had noticed the strained dynamic between them, especially after the death of Jet's father. Kevin had stepped in as a father figure, but Jet never fully accepted him. They clashed frequently, and their arguments often spilled out into the open, with Kevin's booming voice easily carrying through the thin walls of their modest suburban home. When the police questioned Kevin, he was surprisingly calm. Sitting at the kitchen table, his large hands resting on the worn wood surface, Kevin didn't hesitate to answer their questions. He acknowledged the rocky relationship with Chet, but denied any involvement in his stepson's death. Kevin explained that he had been working on a construction site across town on the morning of October 28, leading a crew on a project to build a new wing at the local high school. He even provided the names of his co-workers, offering them as alibis to support his claim. However, as the questioning continued, a shockingly different side of Kevin began to emerge. The police uncovered a surprising secret. Kevin led a secret double life as a drag queen and Adele impersonator, performing under the stage name Adele Dazeem. This revelation shocked the small conservative town of Bridgerton, where such a lifestyle was far from the norm and widely considered to be, quote, evil. Kevin's hidden identity raised questions about how much of his life he had kept from his family, including Jet. Despite this surprising twist, the police couldn't find any direct evidence linking Kevin to the murder. His co-workers confirmed his alibi, and there were no signs that Kevin had been involved in the crime. However, the discovery of his secret life added a new layer of complexity to the case, leading investigators to wonder if there was more to Kevin's story than met the eye. Kevin's motive for possibly wanting Jet out of the picture was still unclear, but his history of violent outbursts and the strained relationship with Jet kept him in the police's sights. As they continued their investigation, Kevin remained under suspicion, with detectives closely monitoring his every move. Bridezilla Cantora, Jet's 38-year-old estranged mother, was the third suspect police investigated. Bridezilla had a troubled past that was well known around Bridgerton. A former stripper who'd struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction, she had been in and out of rehab facilities for most of Jet's childhood. Her life had been a roller coaster, marked by mental illness and several arrests. Brielle's reputation in the town was anything but stable, and many people had written her off as a lost cause. After abandoning Jet when he was a teenager, Brielle had recently tried to reconnect with him. In October 2020, she had returned to Springfield, a nearby city, and was living in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Jet, still harboring resentment toward her for leaving him, was reluctant to let her back into his life. Their relationship remained strained, with only sporadic contact between them. Brielle, however, was determined to make amends and had been reaching out to him more frequently in the days leading up to his death. When the police brought Brielle in for questioning, she appeared nervous and anxious. Dressed in a worn-out hoodie and jeans, she sat fidgeting in the interrogation room, her eyes darting around as she answered the detective's questions. Brielle denied any involvement in Jet's murder, insisting that she had only wanted to reconnect with her son and had no reason to harm him. She claimed that on the morning of October 28, she was at a local AA meeting, trying to stay on the path of sobriety. The meeting, held at a church basement in Springfield, some 200 miles away, was a regular part of her routine. Despite her alibi, detectives couldn't shake the feeling that Brielle was hiding something. Her past behavior and unstable mental state made her a person of interest in the case. The police pressed her on her whereabouts and her interactions with Chet in the days leading up to his death, but Brielle stuck to her story. She maintained that she had nothing to do with the murder and that she was only trying to be a better mother to her son. However, the police were skeptical. Brielle's history of erratic behavior, coupled with the recent attempts to reconnect with Jet, raised questions about her true motives. Was she trying to make up for lost time, or was there something more sinister at play? The detectives continued to dig into her past, searching for any clues that might link her to the crime. In the end, while Brielle's troubled history and strained relationship with Jet made her a prime suspect, there was no concrete evidence to tie her directly to the murder. The investigation into her involvement remained open as the police looked for any overlooked details that could provide the answers they needed. On November 1, 2020, just days before Halloween and the heated presidential election, Bridgerton, Missouri, was experiencing a cold front, with cloudy skies and a brisk wind that had residents bundling up in their favorite hoodies and jackets. It was on this chilly afternoon that a crucial piece of new evidence was discovered, bringing a significant twist to the investigation into Jet Robertson's murder. Detective Mark Travis, who had been leading the investigation, decided to revisit Jet's garage one more time, believing that something had been overlooked. As he searched through the cluttered space, he noticed an old wooden toolbox that had been pushed into a corner. Inside the toolbox, buried beneath a pile of rusty tools, Travis found a small leather-bound notebook. The notebook, worn from years of use, was filled with Jet's neat handwriting, detailing various thoughts and observations. As Detective Travis flipped through the pages, he stumbled upon something that immediately caught his attention. Tucked between notes about bike repairs and homework assignments was a series of entries that revealed Jeff's growing suspicions about Nancy Robertson McClear, his step-grandmother and secret lover. The entries described how Jet had discovered troubling details about the mysterious death of Nancy's third husband, Charles McClear, who had died under strange circumstances back in 1995. Jet had uncovered that Charles' death, initially ruled as an accident, had always bothered him. He found old newspaper clippings and records that hinted at foul play, including an insurance policy that Nancy had cashed out shortly after Charles' death. The notebook entries indicated that Jet had confronted Nancy about his suspicions and had even threatened to expose their secret sexual relationship with him if she didn't end their secret relationship and let him move on with his life. The discovery of the notebook was a game changer. The police now had a motive for why Nancy might have wanted Jet silenced. She couldn't risk him revealing her involvement in Charles' death, which had been quietly buried for years. Detective Travis immediately recognized the importance of this evidence and ordered a thorough review of Charles McClear's death, suspecting that Nancy might have had a pattern of eliminating those who posed a threat to her. The notebook also explained Nancy's increasingly erratic behavior in the days leading up to Jet's murder. It painted a picture of a woman who was desperate to protect her secrets at any cost. With this new evidence in hand, the police were more convinced than ever that Nancy Robertson McClear was not only involved in Jet's death, but that it was a cold, calculated act to keep him from exposing her past. As the investigation moved forward, the police prepared to confront Nancy with this damning new evidence, bringing them one step closer to solving the mystery of Jet's tragic death. On the morning of November 3, 2020, the day of the contentious presidential election, Bridgerton, Missouri was buzzing with election talk. But the local police were focused on a different task. With the new evidence from Jet Robertson's notebook in hand, Detective Mark Travis and his team felt confident they had found the murderer. The notebook entries, which revealed Jet's suspicions about Nancy Robertson McClear's involvement in the suspicious death of her third husband, Charles McClear, in 1995, provided a strong motive for Nancy to silence Jet permanently. The police carefully reviewed the evidence, piecing together the sequence of events. They believed that Nancy, consumed by her obsessive love for Jet and terrified of her dark past being exposed, had lured Jet into the garage on the night of his murder. There, in a fit of desperation and fear, she grabbed a heavy wrench from his toolbox, the very tool Jet used daily for his shop class, and bludgeoned him to death. The brutal act ensured that Jet could never reveal her twin secrets. With this theory in mind, Detective Travis obtained an arrest warrant for Nancy Robertson McClear. While most of the town was preparing for a tense election day, the police made their move. They arrived at Nancy's quaint, well-kept home in Bridgerton, where she had been living alone since Charles' death. The officers knocked on the door, and Nancy, appearing calm and composed, answered. As the police read her the charges, Nancy's demeanor quickly changed. Shock and panic washed over her face as she realized the evidence against her was overwhelming. She protested her innocence, insisting that she loved Jet and could never harm him. But the detectives remained firm, knowing they had enough to bring her to justice. Nancy was handcuffed and led out of her home, a scene witnessed by a few neighbors who had gathered on the street, curious about the police presence. The news of her arrest spread quickly through Bridgerton, shocking the tight-knit community. Many found it hard to believe that the sweet, elderly woman they had known for years could be capable of such a horrific crime. As Nancy was taken into custody, Jet's family, who had been grappling with the loss of their loved one, finally felt a sense of relief. Although the arrest didn't bring Jet back, it gave them hope that justice would be served. The police had successfully unraveled the twisted relationship and dark secrets that led to Jet Robertson's tragic death, and now the focus shifted to bringing Nancy to trial for her crimes. Nancy Robertson McClear's trial began in December 2020, just weeks after the heated presidential election. The case had captured the attention of Bridgerton, Missouri, with local newspapers like the Bridgerton Gazette covering every detail. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michelle Harmon, 42, a determined and sharp-minded lawyer known for her tenacity, presented a strong case against Nancy. They highlighted the evidence found in Jet's notebook, which revealed Nancy's involvement in the suspicious death of her third husband, Charles McClear. This, they argued, was the motive for her killing Jet. He had threatened to expose her dark secret. During the trial, the prosecution laid out the events leading to Jet's death. They described how Nancy, consumed by fear and obsession, lured Jet to the garage and bludgeoned him to death with a wrench from his own toolbox. The wrench was not only a tool Jet used daily for his shock class, but also a symbol of Nancy's desperate attempt to silence him forever. The prosecution's argument was clear. Nancy had committed a premeditated murder to protect her secret. The defense, led by Robert Timmons, 54, a seasoned attorney with a reputation for defending tough cases, painted a different picture. They argued that Nancy was a frail, elderly woman who couldn't possibly commit such a violent act. They suggested that the real killer was still out there and that Nancy was being unfairly targeted because of her close relationship with Jet. Timmons tried to cast doubt on the notebook entries, suggesting they were merely the thoughts of a troubled teenager. The trial was emotionally charged, with Jet's family members, including his mother Betrayal, attending every session. They listened in tears as the details of Jet's final moments were recounted, and their grief was palpable in the courtroom. The jury, however, was not swayed by the defense's arguments. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict of guilty. Nancy Robertson McClear was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was met with mixed emotions: relief from Jet's family, who felt justice had been served, and shock from some community members who had once respected Nancy as a beloved teacher and neighbor. The trial's outcome was a stark reminder of the dark secrets that can lurk beneath the surface, even in the most seemingly innocent of lies. After Nancy Robertson McClear's conviction, life in Bridgerton, Missouri, slowly began to return to normal, though the memory of the grisly murder lingered. The town, already stressed by the ongoing pandemic and the contentious 2020 election, was shaken by the revelations during the trial. Many residents, who had once respected Nancy as a beloved teacher, struggled to reconcile the image of the sweet elderly woman with the cold-blooded killer she had become. Jet Robertson's family tried to move forward, but the loss of their son and the horrifying circumstances of his death left deep scars. His mother, Betrayal Cantora, found herself struggling with guilt and grief. She had only recently re-entered Jet's life, hoping to rebuild their strained relationship. Instead, she was left to mourn a future that would never come. Betrayal returned to Springfield, where she continued her work as a nurse, but the emotional toll of the tragedy weighed heavily on her. She sought solace in therapy and support groups, where she could share her pain with others who had experienced similar losses. Kevin Robertson, Jet's stepfather, also had to come to terms with the truth about his mother. He had long suspected something was off about Nancy's relationship with Jet, but he never imagined it would lead to murder. After the trial, Kevin stepped away from his work as a construction foreman to focus on his family. He spent more time with his children, hoping to heal the wounds left by the tragedy. Kevin also decided to leave Bridgerton, seeking a fresh start in a new town where the past wouldn't paw him daily. For the residents of Bridgerton, the murder of Jet Robertson became a cautionary tale, a story that parents shared with their children as a warning about the dangers that can lurk even in the small town. The case would be remembered as a dark chapter in the town's history, a stark reminder that even the most trusted individuals can harbor deadly secrets. Noah Beasley was a 19-year-old with a shy and quiet personality. Born and raised in the small town of Cottonwood, Arizona, Noah had just graduated from high school in May 2021, where he was known as the shy kid who always carried a guitar on his back. While many of his classmates were preparing for college or starting jobs, Noah was still trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. He had a passion for music and dreamed of becoming a musician one day, but he hadn't yet decided how to make that dream come true. Noah lived with his mother, Jenna Beasley, in a modest trailer on the outskirts of town. Their financial situation was tough. Jenna was a single mother who had struggled to make ends meet for most of Noah's life, especially after losing her job due to the economic downturn caused by the pandemic. The stress of their financial difficulties weighed heavily on Noah. He often felt responsible for helping his mother, who was deeply in debt. Despite his quiet nature, Noah had a kind heart. He was the type of person who would go out of his way to help others, even when he was struggling himself. In the days leading up to his death, Noah was in a strange situation. Just a week earlier, he had married Gertrude "Dirty" Hartford, a 65-year-old retired heiress. Gertie was known for her extravagant lifestyle and had been married several times before. She insisted on a grand wedding, which took place at a luxury resort in nearby Sedona. The wedding was over the top, with expensive decorations, a gourmet menu, and a designer wedding dress that Gertie had specially made. Her groom, Noah, however, seemed out of place at the event. He appeared nervous and unsure about the whole situation. The sudden announcement of his marriage to 65-year-old Gertrude Hartford came as a shock to everyone who knew him. Many wondered what could have led the gentle, introverted Noah to make such a drastic decision. Some speculated it was connected to his mother's financial struggles, while others feared he was being manipulated. Noah's relationship with Gertie wasn't just unusual because of their age difference. Gertie was a demanding and controlling person. She often threw tantrums when things didn't go her way, and Noah found himself increasingly overwhelmed by her behavior. He confided in his mother about his doubts and fears, but Jenna encouraged him to stay in the marriage. As a result, Noah felt trapped, torn between his mother's wishes and his growing discomfort with his new life. At the time of his death, Noah was still trying to navigate his new reality. He had withdrawn from his friends and spent most of his time in his new home with Gertie. His dream of becoming a musician seemed further away than ever. He was a young man who had lost his way, unable to see a future that made sense to him. On the morning of October 8, 2021, the peaceful town of Sedona was shaken by a grim discovery. At 8:30 a.m., Marjorie Lane, an 82-year-old neighbor, was out for her daily walk when she noticed something unusual at the luxurious home of Gertrude Hartford Beasley. The curtains were drawn, and the front door was slightly ajar. Marjorie, who had lived in the neighborhood for over 30 years, found this odd, especially since Gertrude was known for her strict routine and usually had everything in perfect order. Curious and concerned, Marjorie decided to check on the house. As she approached, she called out, but there was no answer. Hesitant, she stepped inside and immediately noticed a strong, bitter smell. It was then that she saw Noah Beasley lying motionless on the living room floor. His body was slumped against the couch, and scattered around him were several empty pill bottles, all prescription medications. A half-empty glass of water sat on the coffee table beside him. Marjorie was frozen in shock, her heart racing. She had known Noah and couldn't believe what she was seeing. Fighting back tears, she quickly pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her hands trembling as she gave the operator the address and explained what she had found. When the 911 operator asked her to check for signs of life, Marjorie hesitated but did as she was told. She knelt beside Noah and gently shook his shoulder, calling his name. There was no response. She could see that his face was pale, his lips slightly blue, and his breathing had stopped. Marjorie's mind was racing. She recalled the wedding just a week before, where Noah had looked so out of place, standing beside the much older Gertrude in her extravagant wedding gown. She couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong so quickly. With tears streaming down her face, she stayed on the phone with the 911 operator until the police and paramedics arrived. The authorities quickly declared Noah dead at the scene. Marjorie, shaken and devastated, was escorted outside, where she sat on the curb, staring blankly at the house where Noah's young life had tragically ended. The police arrived at the Hartford Beasley residence just before 9:00 a.m. on October 8, 2021. Leading the investigation was Detective Marla Grunwald, a seasoned investigator with the Sedona Police Department. Known for her sharp instincts and no-nonsense attitude, Detective Grunwald wasted no time in assessing the scene. Accompanied by Officer Tom Jenkins, a young but eager recruit, they entered the home that had now become the center of a tragic mystery. The living room, where Noah's body was found, was eerily quiet. The luxurious furniture and tasteful decor contrasted starkly with the lifeless figure on the floor. Detective Grunwald immediately noticed the empty pill bottles scattered around Noah and the glass of water on the coffee table. She took note of the labels, prescriptions for medications like Xanax and Oxycontin, drugs often associated with overdose cases. The scene itself was surprisingly clean. No signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no blood. It was almost too clean, which raised red flags for Detective Grunwald. The neatness suggested that whatever had happened, it wasn't the result of a sudden, chaotic event, but something more calculated. Detective Grunwald directed Officer Jenkins to begin photographing the scene while she called in a forensics team to dust for fingerprints and gather evidence. The coroner, Dr. Evelyn, arrived shortly after to examine the body. She confirmed that Noah had likely died from an overdose, but the amount of drugs present, far beyond the recommended limit, made it clear that this was no accident. As they continued their investigation, Detective Grunwald's eyes were drawn to a small detail, a wedding photo of Noah and Gertrude on the mantel. In the photo, Noah's expression was distant, his eyes downcast, a stark contrast to Gertrude's beaming smile. It was a subtle but telling sign that all was not well in this Newlywed household. The forensics team carefully collected the pill bottles, the glass of water, and any other potential evidence. They also noted a faint smell of perfume in the air, a scent Detective Grumwold recognized as something Gertrude was known for, a signature fragrance from an upscale brand, Channel number 5. By the time they finished, Detective Grumwold had a growing sense that this was more than just an overdose. The evidence pointed to foul play, and the investigation was only just beginning. As the investigation into Noah Beasley's death deepened, the police turned their attention to the most obvious suspect, Gertrude "Gertie" Hartford Beasley, Noah's 65-year-old wife. Gertie was a well-known figure in Sedona, infamous for her extravagant lifestyle and commanding personality. Born into wealth, Gertie had been married multiple times, each union ending in a bitter divorce. Gertie was obsessed with staying youthful and was legendary for her tantrums when things didn't go her way. Her reputation as a Bridezilla was well-earned, as she demanded nothing but perfection from everyone around her. When Detective Marla Grunwald and Officer Tom Jenkins arrived at Gertie's home later that afternoon, they found her lounging by the pool, just a few feet from where her husband died, sipping on a mimosa and flipping through the latest issue of Vogue. Despite the tragic circumstances, Gertie seemed unnervingly calm. Dressed in a designer kaftan and oversized sunglasses, she exuded an air of indifference that immediately caught Detective Grunwald's attention. Gertie greeted the officers with a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. When asked about the events leading up to Noah's death, she explained that she had gone to bed early the night before, leaving Noah in the living room to play his, quote, computer games. She claimed that when she woke up that morning and didn't see him in bed, she assumed he had slept on the couch. She expressed surprise and some sadness upon hearing of his death, but didn't seem particularly distraught, as if she had heard a friend's vet had passed away. During the interrogation, Gertie's story remained consistent, but her lack of emotion raised suspicions. She was cooperative but distant, answering questions with rehearsed precision. When asked about the pill bottles found at the scene, Gertie stated that Noah had been struggling recently and had been prescribed medication to help him cope. She insisted that she had no idea he might overdose and suggested that perhaps Noah had taken more pills than he should have in a moment of despair. Despite her calm demeanor, Detective Grumwold noted a few inconsistencies in Gertie's story. For one, Gertie had mentioned that Noah was playing video games, but the TV was off when Marjorie Lane discovered the body. Additionally, the bed in the master bedroom was untouched, suggesting that Gertie may not have gone to bed at all. The more Detective Grunwald pressed, the more it became clear that Gertie was hiding something. However, without concrete evidence, the police couldn't hold her. Gertie's alibi seemed airtight, but her behavior left a lingering sense of doubt. As the interrogation concluded, Detective Grunwald couldn't shake the feeling that this glamorous, poised woman was more involved in Noah's death than she let on. With Gertrude Hartford Beasley remaining a person of interest, the police turned their attention to the second suspect, Jenna Beasley, Noah's mother. Jenna, 49, was a woman who had faced more than her share of hardships. Her life had been a series of bad decisions, each one seemingly worse than the last. Struggling with crushing debt, Jenna had resorted to selling prescription drugs under the table, a secret she had managed to keep hidden from most, but not all, having been arrested several times. Detective Marla Grunwald knew that Jenna's desperation might have driven her to push Noah into his ill-fated marriage with Gertrude. After all, the union offered Jenna a lifeline out of her financial woes. The idea that her son's marriage could secure her future was too tempting to resist. But what cost? When the police brought Jenna in for questioning, she appeared frazzled and nervous. Dressed in faded jeans and a worn t-shirt, she was a stark contrast to the polished image of Gertrude. Jenna's hands shook as she lit a cigarette, a habit she had picked up again in recent months, and her voice wavered as she answered the detective's questions. Jenna admitted that she had encouraged Noah to marry Gertrude, painting it as an opportunity he couldn't pass up. She spoke of the wedding, held at a lavish Sedona resort, where Noah had seemed out of place amidst the opulence. Jenna claimed she had wanted the best for her son, that she believed Gertrude could provide him and her with money, something she had never been able to provide. However, when the conversation shifted to the drugs found at the scene, Jenna became defensive. She denied knowing anything about the massive amount of pills, insisting that Noah must have taken them himself and gotten it from someplace else. But Detective Grunwald wasn't convinced. Jenna's financial struggles, her involvement in illegal drug sales, and her desperation to secure her future all pointed to her involvement. Under pressure, Jenna's responses became more erratic. She began to contradict herself, at one point claiming she hadn't seen Noah in days, then later stating she had visited him the night before his death. Her nervousness and inconsistent statements only deepened the police's suspicions. Despite her denials, Jenna's connection to the drugs and her clear motive to ensure Noah's marriage worked made her a prime suspect. Detective Grunwald knew Jenna was cunning, ruthless, and would do anything to protect herself, even at the expense of her own son. As the interrogation ended, they were closer to unraveling the truth, but more pieces of the puzzle were still missing. With both Gertrude Hartford Beasley and Jenna Beasley under scrutiny, the police turned their attention to a third suspect. Harry Hartford, Gertrude's ex-husband. At 70 years old, Harry was a wealthy real estate mogul with a reputation for being ruthless in both business and his personal life. His most recent venture involved developing retirement communities across Arizona, a lucrative business that had only expanded his empire. Harry's relationship with Gertrude had ended in a bitter divorce just a few months before she married Noah. The divorce had been a public spectacle, gossiped about in Arizona's highest social circles. Gertrude had walked away with a sizable portion of Harry's wealth, leaving him angry and humiliated. The timing of Noah's marriage to Gertrude, a much younger boy toy, had added insult to injury. Harry's jealousy and lingering resentment made him a prime suspect in the investigation. Detective Marla Grunwald and Officer Tom Jenkins decided to bring Harry in for questioning. When they arrived at his sprawling estate, they found him in his home office, surrounded by legal documents and architectural blueprints. Harry greeted them with a firm handshake, his demeanor confident and controlled. Unlike Jenna, who had been nervous and agitated, Harry was calm and collected, almost as if he had been expecting their visit. During the interrogation, Harry was cooperative, but his answers were carefully measured. He admitted that he was angry about Gertrude's new marriage, describing it as a slap in my bleeping face. However, he denied any involvement in Noah's death. Harry explained that he had been busy with his business and had little contact with Gertrude or Noah since the divorce. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of Noah's death, Harry provided a solid alibi. He claimed he had been at a business dinner in Phoenix, meeting with potential investors. Several high-profile attendees could vouch for his presence, making it difficult for the police to challenge his alibi. Despite his cooperation, Detective Grunwald couldn't shake the feeling that Harry was hiding something. His calmness seemed almost too practiced, as if he had rehearsed his responses. The fact that he had been seen arguing with Gertrude just days before Noah's death only added to the suspicion. Witnesses had reported a heated exchange between the two at a local country club, where Harry had reportedly told Gertrude she would regret their divorce. While the police didn't have enough evidence to arrest Harry, his possible motive, jealousy and revenge, kept him firmly in their sights. The investigation was far from over, and Detective Grunwald knew they had to dig deeper to uncover the truth. On October 15, 2021, just as the investigation seemed to be stalling, a critical piece of new evidence emerged. It was a cool, sunny afternoon, with clouds beginning to form over Sedona. Detective Marla Grunwald was at the station, reviewing the case files once again, when Officer Tom Jenkins rushed in, holding a sealed envelope. It had been delivered anonymously to the station that morning, raising immediate suspicion. Inside the envelope was a USB drive. The contents of the drive were shocking. A series of text messages between Gertrude Hartford Beasley and an unknown contact, dated just days before Noah's death. The messages detailed a plan Gertrude had been hatching to divorce Noah and cut him out of her will, using her knowledge of Jenna Beasley's illegal drug dealings as legal leverage. The messages were laced with Gertrude's frustration over Noah's sullen attitude and lackluster sexual performance as her husband, and her growing impatience to rid herself of him. "Sex with him is so vanilla," one message read. "His bleep is smaller than my ring finger." Another chilling text stated, "If that bleep Jenna thinks she's getting away with this bleep, she's got another thing coming. I'll make sure she and that small bleep pay." The messages provided crucial insight into Gertrude's mindset and her intentions. It became clear that she had been orchestrating a plan to eliminate both Noah and Jenna from her life. But the messages also hinted at the involvement of a third party, someone who was helping Gertrude gather information on Jenna's prescription drug dealing. Detective Grunwald and her team immediately began tracing the origins of the messages. They discovered that the anonymous contact was, in fact, one of Gertrude's private investigators, someone she had hired to dig up dirt on Jenna in the days before she married Noah. This investigator had uncovered Jenna's drug dealing record and was feeding Gertrude the information she needed to execute her plan. The new evidence painted a damning picture of Gertrude as a manipulative and vengeful woman, willing to go to any lengths to get what she wanted. It also raised serious questions about Jenna's role in Noah's death. Had Jenna learned of Gertrude's plan and acted out of desperation, or was she merely a pawn in Gertrude's twisted game? With this fresh evidence in hand, the police intensified their focus on both Gertrude and Jenna. The investigation took on a new urgency as it became clear that the truth was far more complex than anyone had initially suspected. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the full story had yet to be revealed. On October 20, 2021, as the investigation neared its breaking point, Detective Marla Grumbold received a breakthrough. After analyzing the text messages found on the USB drive and cross-referencing them with phone records, it became clear that Jenna Beasley, Noah's own mother, was behind the deadly plot. Jenna had been using her son as a sexual pawn, driven by desperation and greed. The police now had enough evidence to arrest her. Jenna Beasley, 49, was a woman who saw life as a constant struggle. Crushed by debt and haunted by poor life choices, Jenna saw Noah's marriage to Gertrude as her ticket out of financial ruin. She was terrified that Noah, who was not known to be sexually interested in women, would leave Gertrude, shattering Jenna's hopes for a steady supply of cash. To ensure that wouldn't happen, Jenna had been secretly feeding Noah prescription drugs and sexual enhancers to keep him compliant and performing sexually. But her plan went terribly wrong when Noah accidentally overdosed, taking far more than she had intended. The twist came when it was revealed that Gertrude, unsatisfied with Noah's lack of sexual enthusiasm as a husband, had been planning to divorce him and cut both him and Jenna out of her life. She had discovered Jenna's drug dealings and intended to use that information to keep them out of her money. But Jenna, desperate to keep the marriage intact, took matters into her own hands. On the night of Noah's death, Jenna had given him a stronger dose of the drugs, hoping to calm him down. But Noah, distraught over his loveless marriage and fearful of Gertrude's viciousness, took even more pills on his own, leading to a fatal overdose. Jenna hadn't meant to kill her son, but her actions directly caused his death. When the police confronted Jenna with the evidence, she initially denied everything. Her demeanor was panicked and frantic, a stark contrast to her earlier calm. But as Detective Grumbold laid out the damning messages and phone records, Jenna's defenses crumbled. Jenna claimed she never intended to kill her son, only to keep him in the marriage until they could secure their financial future. Jenna's arrest sent shockwaves through the small towns of Sedona and Cottonwood. Noah's family was devastated by the revelation that his own mother had caused his death. The community, already shaken by the bizarre circumstances of the marriage, was now grappling with the tragic reality that greed and desperation had led to such a senseless loss. As Jenna was led away in handcuffs, she appeared numb, unable to fully grasp the gravity of her actions. The Beasley family, overwhelmed by grief, expressed their sorrow and disbelief, struggling to come to terms with what had happened. The arrest marked the end of a dark chapter in Sedona's history, but the pain and shock would linger for a long time. Jenna Beasley's trial began in early December 2022. The courtroom was packed with reporters from outlets like the Arizona Republic and True Crime Weekly, eager to cover the shocking details of the case. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Mark Christensen, 42, painted Jenna as a manipulative and desperate woman who had placed her own financial needs above the life of her son. Christensen, known for his sharp intellect and relentless pursuit of justice, argued that Jenna's actions were premeditated and driven by greed. He pointed to the text messages, phone records, and Jenna's own confession as irrefutable evidence of her guilt. The defense, headed by public defender Carlita Vasquez, 28, countered by portraying Jenna as a troubled mother who had made a terrible mistake. Vasquez, a seasoned attorney with a reputation for compassion, argued that Jenna never intended to kill Noah. She emphasized Jenna's financial struggles, her desperation to secure a better future for her family, and the fact that Noah's death was accidental. Vasquez appealed to the jury's sympathy, asking them to consider Jenna's difficult circumstances and the pressure she was under. Throughout the trial, Noah's family watched in agony. His mother's actions had torn their family apart, and the pain was evident in their tearful expressions. The prosecution's case was strong, but the defense's argument for leniency struck a chord with some jurors. On December 15, 2022, the jury delivered their verdict. Jenna Beasley was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The jury believed that while Jenna's actions had caused Noah's death, there was not enough evidence to prove that she had intended to kill him. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, with Jenna showing little reaction, her face pale and expressionless. The judge sentenced Jenna to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Some felt it was too lenient, given the tragic loss of Noah's life, while others believed it was fair, considering Jenna's desperate circumstances. For Noah's family, the verdict brought little comfort. They were left to grapple with the reality that their loved one was gone, taken by the very person who was supposed to protect him. The town of Sedona, too, was left to process the disturbing events that had unfolded in their midst, a stark reminder of how greed and desperation can lead to unthinkable actions. In the months following Jenna Beasley's sentencing, the impact of the case continued to resonate deeply within the Sedona community. Betrayal had left a lasting mark on everyone involved, from the Beasley family to local residents. Jenna Beasley was sent to the Arizona State Prison Complex in Perryville, a high-security facility located near Phoenix. In prison, Jenna faced a challenging environment. Her case had received significant media attention, and she was often the subject of gossip and judgment from fellow inmates. The prison system offered her limited opportunities for rehabilitation and support, leaving her to reflect on the tragic consequences of her actions. Jenna spent her time participating in prison programs aimed at addressing substance abuse and mental health issues, hoping to find some sense of redemption and prepare for her eventual release. Despite the turmoil, life in Sedona gradually returned to normal. The town held a memorial for Noah at a local park, attended by friends, family, and residents who wished to honor his memory. The event featured live music and speeches celebrating Noah's life and dreams. It was a somber reminder of the young man whose life was cut short, and it offered the community a chance to come together and support one another. As for the media, coverage of the case eventually faded, making way for new stories and developments. However, the impact of Noah's death and the subsequent trial continued to serve as a poignant reminder of the consequences of desperation and greed, affecting everyone who had been touched by the tragic events of October 2021. Paula Kimley Ross was a 38-year-old nurse living in Toronto, Ontario. She worked at Toronto General Hospital, one of the largest and most well-known hospitals in the city. Paula was known for her compassion and dedication to her job. Her co-workers and patients appreciated her caring nature and exceptional skills. She was the kind of nurse who always went the extra mile to help others. Outside of work, Paula was outgoing and loved spending time with her friends and family. She had a passion for fishing and often went to Lake Ontario on weekends to relax and enjoy nature. Paula grew up in the nearby city of Waterloo and attended the University of Toronto, where she earned her nursing degree. She had a close relationship with her parents, Margaret and John Kimley, who still lived in the house where she grew up. Paula also had a younger brother, Michael, who worked as a teacher in a nearby school. They often had family dinners and spent holidays together. Her friends described her as bubbly and full of life, always ready to lend a helping hand or share a laugh. She was known for her love of coffee from Tim Hortons, often seen with a cup in hand during her shifts. Paula's personal life was complicated. Paula had a boyfriend named James Deacon. James was married, and their affair was filled with trust issues and frequent arguments. Paula confided in her best friend and ex-lover, Emma Kwong, about her troubles and dreams of finding happiness and peace. She hoped to sort out her relationships and move forward with a fresh start. In the days before her death, Paula was busy with her work at the hospital. She was involved in a new project aimed at improving patient care and was excited about the positive changes it would bring. She spent her evenings chatting with Emma, planning a weekend fishing trip to clear her mind and find some peace. On the last day of her life, Paula had a long shift at the hospital, but still found time to call her mother and make plans for a family dinner the following week. On October 12, 2012, a chilly Friday morning, Toronto was waking up to a crisp autumn day. The leaves were turning shades of orange and red, and the air was cool. Paula's neighbor, Robert Chu, noticed that her apartment seemed unusually quiet. Robert, a retired postman, often saw Paula in the mornings, either heading to work or out for a jog. But for the past few days, he hadn't seen her at all. This worried him. Robert decided to check on Paula. He walked over to her apartment and knocked on the door. But there was no answer. He called out her name, but the apartment remained silent. Feeling uneasy, Robert tried the door and found it unlocked. He stepped inside and immediately sensed something was wrong. The apartment was eerily quiet, and a strange smell lingered in the air. As Robert walked through the hallway, he noticed the living room was in disarray. Furniture was overturned, and there were signs of a struggle. His heart raced as he moved towards the kitchen. That's when he saw Paula. She was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. Her body was horribly mutilated, with her limbs missing and her throat slit so severely that she was almost beheaded. Overwhelmed with shock and fear, Robert stumbled backward and nearly fell. He fumbled for his phone and dialed 911, his hands shaking. When the operator answered, Robert's voice was trembling as he described the gruesome scene. The operator tried to calm him down and assured him that help was on the way. While waiting for the police, Robert stood outside Paula's apartment, staring blankly at the ground. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. A few minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. 2 police cars pulled up, followed by an ambulance. Officers quickly exited their vehicles and approached Robert, who directed them to Paula's apartment. The officers entered cautiously, guns drawn, and were met with the same horrific sight that had stunned Robert. They immediately secured the scene and called for additional backup, including homicide detectives and forensic experts. Paramedics arrived but quickly realized there was nothing they could do for Paula. The news of Paula's death spread quickly through the neighborhood and soon made headlines. Local media outlets, such as the Toronto Star and CP24, covered the shocking story. Neighbors gathered in small groups, talking in hushed tones about the brutal murder that had occurred in their quiet community. The police arrived quickly at Paula's apartment on the morning of October 12, 2012. Detective Zara Singh and her partner, Detective Mark Benson, were in charge of the investigation. Detective Singh, known for her sharp intuition and calm demeanor, led the team. Detective Benson, experienced and methodical, supported her every step of the way. The crime scene was horrifying. Paula's body was found in the kitchen, lying in a pool of blood. Her limbs were missing, and her throat was slit so deeply that she was almost beheaded. The living room showed signs of a violent struggle. Furniture was overturned, and items were scattered across the floor. Blood spatter patterns indicated a fierce fight had taken place. Detectives Singh and Benson examined the scene closely. They noted that the attack appeared personal, likely driven by intense anger or jealousy. The brutal nature of the wounds suggested a crime of passion. They knew they had to act quickly to find the killer. The forensic team arrived shortly after the detectives. They began by photographing the entire apartment, capturing every detail. They used luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains, which glowed under a special blue light. Fingerprint powder was dusted on surfaces to gather prints. The team also collected hair and fiber samples for further analysis. Detective Singh spoke to Robert Chu, Paula's neighbor who had found her body. He was still shaken, his voice trembling as he recounted the events of that morning. Robert described Paula as a friendly and caring neighbor, and he couldn't think of anyone who would want to harm her. While the forensic team worked inside, Detectives Singh and Benson canvassed the neighborhood. They spoke to other neighbors and nearby shop owners, asking if they had seen or heard anything unusual in the days leading up to the murder. Some neighbors reported hearing loud arguments from Paula's apartment, while others mentioned seeing unfamiliar people around. The detectives also reviewed security footage from nearby stores and street cameras. They hoped to spot anyone entering or leaving Paula's apartment around the time of the murder. They paid particular attention to footage from a nearby Tim Hortons, Canada's favorite coffee shop where Paula was known to visit regularly. As the day progressed, the evidence collected from the crime scene began to paint a clearer picture of the events that led to Paula's death. The detectives knew they had to follow every lead and piece together the puzzle to bring justice for Paula and her grieving family. The brutal and tragic nature of Paula's murder left a deep impact on the community. Local news outlets, including the Toronto Star and CBC News, provided continuous updates, and residents anxiously awaited news of the arrest. Detectives Singh and Benson remained determined to solve the case, knowing the killer was still out there. The first suspect the police investigated was James L. Deacon, 55, an IT specialist. James was known for his intelligence and meticulous nature. He worked long hours and was often described as introverted. He had been in a volatile relationship with Paula for several months. Their relationship was full of arguments and accusations of cheating. Friends and co-workers noticed James had become increasingly paranoid and possessive in the months leading up to Paula's murder. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson brought James in for questioning on the afternoon of October 13, 2012. He looked tired and nervous. During the interrogation, James's emotions swung wildly. He was clearly distressed, sometimes showing anger and other times appearing deeply sad. He denied any involvement in Paula's death, claiming he was at work at the time of the murder. He provided his work schedule and contact information for his boss and colleagues, hoping to verify his alibi. But detectives asked James about his relationship with Paula. He admitted they had frequent fights, mostly about trust issues. James said Paula was suspicious of his interactions with other women and men. He confessed that their last argument had been particularly heated. Paula had accused him of cheating, and he had stormed out of her apartment. This was 2 days before her body was found. Detective Singh pressed James on his feelings towards Paula. He admitted he still had strong feelings for her, despite their problems. He also revealed that Paula had been thinking about ending their relationship, which made him very upset. This revelation raised suspicion about his possible motive. The police then searched James' apartment and car. They were looking for any evidence that could link him to the crime. The forensic team found several items of interest, including a set of knives in his kitchen. They took these knives to the lab to compare them with the wounds on Paula's body. They also took samples of fibers and hairs found in James's car. James's co-workers confirmed he was at work on the day of Paula's murder, but detectives still had doubts. His alibi was strong, but his erratic behavior and emotional responses kept him under close scrutiny. They decided to keep a close watch on him while continuing to investigate other leads. Detectives Singh and Benson knew they needed more concrete evidence to either clear James or confirm their suspicions. The second suspect the police investigated was Emma Kwong, 35. Emma was Paula's best friend and one-time ex-girlfriend. She was known for being loyal, outspoken, and very protective of Paula. Emma worked at a small firm in Toronto. She and Paula had a very close relationship, and Emma often confided in Paula about her life and problems. Emma had a strong dislike for James and was also known to desire an affair with Paula, which made her a person of interest in the investigation. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson brought Emma in for questioning on October 14, 2012. Emma appeared calm but visibly upset by the loss of her friend. She told the detectives that she had last seen Paula a few days before her death. They had met for coffee at Tim Hortons and talked about Paula's troubled relationships over a case of Timbits. Emma admitted she never liked James and had always warned Paula about him. She believed James was too controlling and not good for Paula. The detectives asked Emma about her own relationship with Paula. Emma spoke fondly of their deep friendship and past romantic involvement. She confessed she still had feelings for Paula and wished they could have been more than friends again. However, Emma insisted she would never harm Paula and wanted only the best for her. She seemed genuinely heartbroken by Paula's death. When asked about her whereabouts on the day of Paula's murder, Emma said she was at work and provided her work schedule as well as contact details for her colleagues. Her co-workers confirmed her alibi, stating that Emma had been at the office all day and had even worked late on a project. The detectives then searched Emma's apartment and car. They found nothing out of the ordinary, no signs of blood or anything linking her to the crime. However, they did find several letters and messages from Paula, which showed the close and sometimes intense nature of their relationship. These messages indicated that Paula often leaned on Emma for support during tough times, especially when dealing with James. Despite Emma's clear alibi and lack of physical evidence tying her to the crime scene, Detectives Singh and Benson couldn't ignore her strong feelings for Paula and her open dislike for James. They decided to keep Emma under observation while they continued their investigation. On October 20, 2012, a chilly and overcast Saturday morning, the Toronto Police Department received a crucial tip. An anonymous caller reported seeing a suspicious bag in a dumpster behind a local Starbucks on Queen Street West. The caller mentioned that the bag appeared out of place and had a strong, unpleasant smell. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson were immediately dispatched to the location. Upon arrival, they spotted the black garbage bag in question. As they carefully opened it, they found several blood-stained items, including a kitchen knife, torn clothing, and a pair of rubber gloves. These items were promptly collected and sent to the forensic lab for analysis. The detectives hoped this new evidence would provide fresh leads. The forensic team, led by Dr. Karen Lee, worked quickly to process the items. The kitchen knife had traces of Paula's blood, and the gloves had fingerprints. They also found fibers on the torn clothing that matched those found in Paula's house. This new evidence was promising, but the detectives needed more to link it directly to the killer. While the forensic team analyzed the evidence, Detectives Singh and Benson revisited Paula's friends and family, asking if they recognized the items. No one could identify the clothing or gloves, but the knife seemed to match a set that Paula owned. This connection was crucial, as it indicated the items could have come from Paula's house. Dr. Lee soon reported that the fingerprints on the gloves matched those of Lorelei Duncan Deacon, James' wife. Lorelei had not been a primary suspect until this discovery. Lorelei, 52, was known for her cooking skills and often used similar knives in her kitchen. This new evidence placed her under the spotlight. Detectives Singh and Benson decided to bring Lorelei in for questioning. She appeared nervous but maintained her innocence, claiming she had no idea how her fingerprints could be on the gloves. Lorelei explained that she often used gloves while gardening and must have misplaced them. The detectives were skeptical but needed more proof. They obtained a warrant to search Lorelei's house. During the search, they found several more gloves that matched the pair in the dumpster. They also discovered a journal in which Lorelei detailed her growing suspicions about James' affair with Paula. The journal entries showed Lorelei's increasing anger and paranoia. With this new evidence, Detectives Singh and Benson felt they were getting closer to solving the case. The detectives knew they needed to proceed carefully to ensure they caught the right person. The next suspect the police investigated was David Larzuelo, 23. David was charming and charismatic, with a history of intense but short-lived relationships. He had briefly dated James about a year before Paula's murder. Although the affair had ended, David and James had stayed in contact. David was known for his unpredictable behavior and habitual pot smoking, which made the police consider him a potential threat. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson brought David in for questioning on October 22, 2012. David appeared relaxed and nonchalant, but the detectives knew they needed to dig deeper. They began by asking him about his relationship with James. David admitted they had dated, but claimed they were now just friends. He said they had not seen each other in weeks and that he had no interest in rekindling their relationship. When asked about his whereabouts on the day of Paula's murder, David said he had been hanging out with friends at a local bar, the Drake Hotel on Queen Street West. He provided the names of his friends and mentioned they had spent the evening watching a hockey game on TV. The detectives followed up with his friends, who confirmed his alibi. They said David had been with them all night and had left the bar around midnight. Despite his solid alibi, the detectives decided to search David's apartment. They found nothing suspicious at first glance other than an unusual amount of drug paraphernalia. However, they did discover a notebook filled with angry and obsessive thoughts about James. The entry suggested David was still upset about their breakup and jealous of James' other relationships. This raised questions about David's potential motive. David's behavior during the interrogation was calm and almost too relaxed, which made the detectives wary. They decided to keep him under surveillance while continuing to gather evidence. They also checked his phone records and social media activity to see if there were any connections to Paula or other suspicious behavior. The community, closely following the investigation through local news outlets, was anxious for any new developments. The brutal nature of Paula's murder and the growing list of suspects kept everyone on edge. As the detectives continued their work, they knew they had to be thorough to bring justice to Paula and her family. The investigation into David provided more questions than answers, but it also helped the detectives understand the complex web of relationships surrounding Paula. With each new piece of evidence, they moved closer to finding the truth and solving the case that had gripped the entire city. On October 28, 2012, a cold and rainy Sunday afternoon, the Toronto Police Department made a breakthrough. Forensic analysis had finally provided the crucial link needed to solve Paula's murder. The fingerprints on the rubber gloves found in the dumpster behind Starbucks matched Lorelei Duncan Deacon, James' wife. Lorelei, 52, was known for her cooking skills and often used similar knives in her kitchen. The detectives had previously questioned her, but she had maintained her innocence. Now, with this new evidence, Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson knew they had to act quickly. Lorelei's motive was clear. She had discovered that her husband James had kindled his affair with Paula. Lorelei had warned James to end the relationship to save their marriage, but he had not listened. Her escalating paranoia and sense of betrayal drove her into a fit of rage. In her anger, Lorelei had decided to murder Paula in her home. The details were gruesome. Paula was found with multiple stab wounds, her limbs missing, and her throat slit so severely she was almost beheaded. Lorelei had even used meat from Paula's limbs to make a soup she called infidelity soup, which she then secretly served to her husband. On the evening of October 28, 2012, Detective Singh and Detective Benson, along with a team of officers, arrived at Lorelei's house. It was cold and raining heavily. They knocked on the door, and Lorelei answered, looking surprised and anxious. When they told her she was under arrest for the murder of Paula Kinley Ross, Lorelei tried to maintain her composure but was visibly shaken. As Lorelei was handcuffed and taken to the police station, she remained mostly silent. She seemed to be in shock, occasionally muttering about soup and infidelity. The arrest was covered widely in the media, with news outlets reporting every detail. Paula's family was relieved to hear that the murderer had been caught. They expressed their gratitude to the police for their hard work and dedication. Paula's mother, Mary Kinley, said, "We can finally begin to heal now that we know the person responsible for this horrific act is in custody." James, on the other hand, was devastated. He had lost both his lover, and now his wife was facing serious charges. The community was also relieved but remained in shock over the brutal nature of the crime and the unexpected identity of the murderer. The detectives felt a sense of accomplishment, but knew the case was not over yet. The next steps involved preparing for the trial and ensuring that Lorelei faced justice for her heinous crime. The trial of Lorelei Duncan Deacon for the murder of Paula Kinley Ross began on January 15, 2013, in a packed Toronto courthouse. The prosecution was led by Rachel Blythe, a seasoned Crown prosecutor known for her fierce dedication to justice. Blythe, 42, presented a compelling case against Lorelei. She described the brutal nature of the crime and highlighted the overwhelming evidence, including the fingerprints on the gloves and the forensic match of the knife to Paula's kitchen. Blythe argued that Lorelei's jealousy and paranoia drove her to commit the horrific act. She pointed to Lorelei's journal entries detailing her suspicions and anger about James' affair with Paula. The prosecutor also emphasized the shocking details of how Lorelei had used parts of Paula's body to make infidelity soup, which she then served to her unsuspecting husband. Blythe's presentation was meticulous and emotionally charged, painting a vivid picture of Lorelei's calculated and gruesome actions. The defense attorney, Michael Roberts, 38, took a different approach. Roberts was known for his calm demeanor and sharp legal mind. He argued that Lorelei was mentally unstable and had acted in a moment of temporary insanity. He presented medical records showing Lorelei had been under significant stress and had a history of mental health issues. Roberts also brought in expert witnesses who testified about the impact of her deteriorating mental state on her actions. Throughout the trial, Paula's family attended every session. They listened intently, often holding back tears as the details of Paula's final moments were recounted. Mary Kinley, Paula's mother, was visibly distraught but determined to see justice served. The emotional toll on the family was palpable, and the courtroom atmosphere was tense. On February 10, 2013, after several days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Lorelei Duncan Deacon was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to the maximum sentence, 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 15 years. As the verdict was read, Lorelei showed little emotion, staring blankly ahead. James, sitting in the back of the courtroom, broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the reality of his wife's fate and his own part in the tragic events. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a harrowing chapter for Paula's loved ones and the beginning of their long journey toward healing. After Lorelei Duncan Deacon's trial, life for everyone involved began to change. James Deacon, Lorelei's husband, faced the most dramatic changes. With his wife in prison, James was left to pick up the pieces of his life. He sought therapy to deal with the trauma and guilt of the affair that had set off the tragic chain of events. James also distanced himself from his old social circles, finding it difficult to face those who knew the full story. Detectives Zara Singh and Mark Benson returned to their regular duties, but felt the weight of the case long after it was closed. Their work had brought some justice to Paula's family, but the brutality of the crime left a lasting impact on them. They were praised by the Toronto Police Department for their dedication and perseverance, with local news outlets like the Toronto Star and CP24 highlighting their efforts in bringing Lorelei to justice. Emma Quam, Paula's best friend and one-time romantic partner, continued her work as a graphic designer but found it hard to focus. She attended counseling sessions to cope with the loss and betrayal she felt. Emma also became an advocate for domestic violence victims, speaking at events and sharing Paula's story in hopes of preventing similar tragedies. David Larzuelo, the young man previously investigated, was relieved to be cleared but haunted by his connection to the case. He moved to Vancouver, seeking a fresh start away from the painful memories in Toronto. David pursued a career in social work, inspired by Paula's compassion and dedication to helping others. Life after the trial was a mixture of healing and remembrance. Paula's legacy lived on through the positive changes and awareness her tragic death inspired. Her family and friends continued to honor her memory by living out the values she held dear: compassion, dedication, and a commitment to helping others. Michael Marshall Tucker was a 47-year-old man who lived in Pacifica, California. He worked as a software engineer, which means he made programs for computers. He was really good at his job and came up with many new ideas. Marshall was known for working hard and always trying his best. Marshall had a happy family. He was married to Laney, and they had 2 children. Activia was 14 years old, and Marlboro was 10 years old. The family lived in a nice house near the beach. Marshall loved his family very much and always spent time with them. He often took them hiking on the weekends. They went to places like Maury Point and the Sweeney Ridge Trail. Marshall liked taking pictures of nature, especially the ocean and sunsets. He had a camera and always carried it with him on hikes. Marshall went to Stanford University, where he met his best friend, Nate Harrison. Nate and Marshall stayed close friends even after college. They both worked at the same tech company, which made computer programs for big businesses. In his free time, Marshall liked to read books about technology and science. He also liked watching shows like The X-Files and Star Trek Voyager with his kids. People who knew Marshall said he was kind and helpful. His friends and co-workers admired him for being smart and caring. He always had a smile on his face and was ready to help anyone in need. At work, he was excited about a new project that he thought would change how people use computers. Marshall and his team were working on this project, hoping to present it to the company leaders soon. In the days before his death, Marshall was busy but happy. He talked about the family hiking trip they had planned for the weekend. They were going to visit Point Reyes National Seashore. Marshall was also helping Activia with her science project about marine life. He spent time with Marlboro building a model rocket. Marshall was looking forward to many things. He dreamed of one day starting his own tech company. He also wanted to travel with his family to places like Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Canyon. Marshall Tucker was a good man with big dreams and a loving family. His sudden and tragic death left a huge hole in the lives of those who loved him. On March 23, 2003, the weather in Pacifica, California, was cloudy and cool. At about 8 o'clock a.m., Activia Tucker, Marshall's 14-year-old daughter, woke up and went downstairs to the living room. She was expecting to see her dad getting ready for their planned hike. Instead, she found a terrifying scene that would change her life forever. The living room was a mess. Furniture was turned over, and things were scattered everywhere. In the middle of the room, Activia saw her father, Marshall, lying on the floor. There was blood around his head, and he wasn't moving. Activia screamed and called out for her mother, Laney. Laney Tucker rushed into the room. She saw Marshall and immediately ran to the phone to call 911. Her hands were shaking, and her voice was trembling as she told the operator what had happened. She said it looked like someone had broken into their house and hurt her husband. The police arrived quickly. Officers were on the scene within 10 minutes. Officer Mark Stevens was the first to enter the house. He found Laney crying and holding Activia, who was still in shock. Stevens asked them to step outside while he checked the rest of the house. Officer Stevens noticed the living room looked like someone had tried to make it appear as if a robbery had occurred, but there were too many things that didn't add up. Valuable items, like the TV and Laney's jewelry, were left untouched. Marshall's body was lying near the fireplace. Next to him was a heavy ornate candlestick that was covered in blood. It was clear that this was the weapon used to kill him. The detectives began their work, taking pictures of the scene and collecting evidence. They dusted for fingerprints and looked for any clues that might tell them who had done this. Outside, Laney and Activia were talking to each other. Laney was trying to stay calm for her daughter, but it was clear that she was devastated. Activia was crying and kept asking why someone would hurt her dad. The discovery of Marshall Tucker's body was the start of a complicated and tragic investigation. The peaceful life of the Tucker family was shattered, and the search for the truth had just begun. When the police arrived at the Tucker home on March 23, 2003, they quickly secured the scene. The lead investigators, Detectives Laura Grant and Michael Chua, both experienced and respected, began their work. Detective Grant was 45 years old, with short brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude. Detective Chua, 50, was tall and lean, known for his sharp intuition. The living room was a chaotic scene. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and items were scattered all over the floor. It looked like someone had tried to make it seem like a robbery. However, some valuable items were left untouched, which made the detectives suspicious. A flat-screen TV, Laney's expensive jewelry, and a new laptop were still in place. Marshall's body was found near the fireplace. His head was badly injured, and there was blood on an ornate candlestick nearby. The candlestick, a heavy piece from their mantel, was clearly the murder weapon. Marshall's wounds showed he had been hit multiple times, indicating a violent struggle. Detective Grant and Detective Chua started their investigation by looking closely at the crime scene. They took photos and collected evidence. They also dusted for fingerprints on the candlestick and other surfaces. Forensic experts arrived to help, wearing white suits to avoid contaminating the scene. They collected blood samples and fibers that might provide clues. The detectives interviewed Laney and Olivia outside the house. Laney, still in shock, tried to explain what had happened. She said she had been asleep and didn't hear anything unusual. Olivia, who found her father, was too shaken to speak much. Officer Mark Stevens, who was the first to arrive, helped keep them calm and took their initial statements. Detective Grant noted that there were no signs of forced entry. The door was intact, and the windows were not broken. This suggested that the killer either had a key or was let in by someone inside. This made the detectives think that the killer might be someone Marshall knew. The police used special lights to look for hidden evidence, like footprints or blood traces. They also used a device to check for any recent calls or messages on Marshall's and Laney's phones. They hoped this could lead them to more clues about what happened. The investigation team worked through the day, piecing together what they could from the chaotic scene. They collected all the evidence carefully, knowing that each piece might be crucial to solving the case. Marshall Tucker's murder was a shocking and tragic event in the peaceful town of Pacifica. The detectives knew they had a tough job ahead to uncover the truth and bring justice to Marshall and his grieving family. Laney Tucker, Marshall's wife, was the first suspect. Laney was 41 years old, a creative and quiet person. She loved writing adult fiction, especially stories with violent and intense themes. Over the past year, Laney became deeply involved in a fantasy world she created. Her latest story was about a twisted love affair, and her friends noticed that she started mixing up her fantasy with real life. The police found Laney's behavior odd. She seemed distant and sometimes confused about what was real. Detective Grant and Detective Chua brought her in for questioning the day after Marshall was found. They asked her about her relationship with Marshall and what she was doing the night of the murder. Laney told them she had been asleep and didn't hear anything. She said she loved Marshall and couldn't understand why someone would want to hurt him. The detectives noticed that she seemed nervous, often fidgeting and avoiding eye contact. They asked her about her writing and if she ever felt like her stories affected her real life. Laney insisted that her writing was just a hobby and had nothing to do with Marshall's death. The detectives also looked into Laney's recent activities. They found out that she had been acting strangely at her writing group meetings. Her friends said she talked a lot about her story and seemed obsessed with the idea of a dramatic and tragic love. Some of them even wondered if she was getting too involved in her fiction. During the interrogation, Laney's answers were often vague. She didn't have a clear alibi for the night of the murders, saying only that she had taken some sleeping pills and gone to bed early. The detectives asked if anyone else had a key to their house. Laney said only she and Marshall had keys, which made them even more suspicious. The detectives also checked Laney's phone records. They found several text messages and emails that showed her growing obsession with her story. One message to a friend said, "Sometimes I feel like my characters are more real than my own life." This made the detectives think that Laney might have blurred the lines between her fantasy and reality. Laney's reaction to the interrogation was mostly calm, but she seemed tired and stressed. The detectives couldn't tell that she was hiding something or just overwhelmed by the situation. They decided to keep an eye on her while they continued their investigation, looking for more clues that could either prove her guilt or clear her name. Laney Tucker's behavior and her intense connection to her fictional world made her a prime suspect in Marshall's murder, but the detectives needed more evidence to know for sure if she was responsible. Nate Harrison, Marshall's best friend, was the second suspect. Nate was 39 years old and worked with Marshall at the same tech company. He was outgoing, friendly, and known for his easygoing nature. Nate often visited the Tucker household and was considered part of the family. He shared Marshall's passion for technology and innovation, and they had been close friends since their days at Stanford University. Detective Grant and Detective Chua brought Nate in for questioning. They wanted to understand his relationship with Marshall and Laney better. Nate seemed surprised by the suspicion but cooperated fully with the police. He told them about his long friendship with Marshall and how they worked together on many projects. Nate explained that he had been at home the night of the murder working on a new software project. He provided the detectives with the name of a colleague who could confirm he had been online, working late into the night. Nate seemed genuinely upset about Marshall's death and couldn't believe that someone would kill his best friend. The detectives asked Nate about his relationship with Laney. He admitted that he and Laney had become closer over the past year, especially as she struggled with her writing and mental health. Nate said he often tried to support her and keep her grounded when she got too involved in her fictional world. When asked if he had any romantic feelings for Laney, Nate hesitated but then confessed that he did have feelings for her. He quickly added that he never acted on them and that his loyalty was always to Marshall. The detectives found this interesting and wondered if Nate's feelings for Laney could be a motive. The detectives also checked Nate's phone records and computer activity. They found that Nate had sent many messages to Laney, encouraging her writing and offering emotional support. There was nothing directly suspicious in the messages, but the frequency of their communication raised some questions. Nate's demeanor during the interrogation was mostly calm, but he appeared anxious at times, especially when discussing Laney. He seemed genuinely hurt by the loss of his friend and worried about Laney's well-being. The detectives could not determine if his anxiety was due to grief or something more. Nate's strong friendship with Marshall and his unspoken love for Laney made him a complicated figure in the investigation. The detectives needed more evidence to determine if Nate's feelings had anything to do with Marshall's murder, or if he was simply a supportive friend caught in a tragic situation. Nate Harrison's deep connection to both Marshall and Laney made him an important part of the investigation, and the detectives continued to probe for more details that could clarify his role in the unfolding mystery. On March 27, 2003, 4 days after Marshall Tucker's murder, the weather in Pacifica, California, was rainy and cold. Detective Grant and Detective Chua were at the police station when they received a call about new evidence. An officer had found something unusual while going through Laney's phone records and computer files. The new evidence was a series of emails and text messages between Laney and Nate. These messages were different from the ones the detectives had seen before. They were more personal and hinted at something troubling. In one message, Laney wrote to Nate, "I can't stop thinking about my story. It feels so real. Sometimes I wonder if the only way to end it is to make it real." The detectives felt a chill reading the message. It seemed like Laney was losing her grip on reality. Another message from Nate to Laney said, "If this is what you think has to happen, I'm here for you. Just be careful." This message made the detectives suspect that Nate might have known about Laney's plan to kill Marshall. Detective Grant and Detective Chua quickly went to Laney's house to talk to her again. Laney was cooperative but looked tired and stressed. The detectives showed her the messages and asked what they meant. Laney broke down in tears and said she didn't know what was real anymore. She said that she had been so wrapped up in her fantasy world that she felt like it was taking over her life. While Laney was talking, Detective Chua received a call from the forensic team. They had found traces of Nate's fingerprints on the candlestick, the murder weapon. This new evidence was crucial. It showed that Nate had been in the house and touched the weapon. The detectives went to Nate's house to confront him. It was still raining heavily, making the scene feel even more intense. Nate was shocked to see the detectives but let them in. They showed him the messages and told him about the fingerprints. Nate tried to explain that he had been at the Tucker house many times and could have touched the candlestick before, but the detectives didn't believe him. Detective Grant and Detective Chua arrested Nate on suspicion of being involved in Marshall's murder. Nate protested, saying he was only trying to help Laney, but the evidence was strong against him. The new evidence changed the direction of the investigation. The detectives now believed that both Laney and Nate were involved in Marshall's death. They continued to dig deeper, looking for more clues to piece together the full story. The discovery of the messages and fingerprints brought new light to the case, making it clear that the investigation was far from over. The detectives were determined to find the truth and bring justice for Marshall Tucker. Anna Louise Reed was the third suspect. Anna Louise was 24 years old and lived next door to the Tucker family. She was a social worker known for her compassion and protective nature. She often spent time with Laney, offering support during difficult times. Rumors of a romantic relationship between Anna Louise and Laney added a layer of complexity to the investigation. Detective Grant and Detective Chua decided to bring Anna Louise in for questioning. She seemed surprised but agreed to cooperate. Anna Louise described her friendship with Laney and how she often tried to help her through her emotional struggles. She admitted they were very close but denied any romantic involvement. Anna Louise told the detectives she had been at home the night of the murder, reading a book and watching TV. She said she heard nothing unusual and didn't know anything about Marshall's death until Laney called her the next morning. The detectives checked her alibi, looking for any inconsistencies. During the interrogation, Anna Louise appeared calm and composed. She answered all the questions without hesitation. However, the detectives noticed she seemed particularly concerned about Laney's well-being. When asked about Laney's mental state, Anna Louise said Laney had been struggling with reality and often got lost in her fictional world. The detectives asked Anna Louise if she knew about Laney's plans to kill Marshall. She denied knowing anything and said she would have tried to stop her if she did. But detectives found it hard to believe that someone as close to Laney as Anna Louise wouldn't have noticed something was wrong. The detectives also checked Anna Louise's phone records. They found numerous text messages between her and Laney. Most messages were about everyday things, but some hinted at Laney's emotional turmoil. In one message, Laney wrote, "Sometimes I feel like my stories are more real than my life." Anna Louise replied, "You need to focus on reality. I'm here for you." Detective Grant and Detective Chua continued to question Anna Louise, trying to find any clue that might link her to the crime. They asked about her relationship with Marshall and if she ever felt jealous of him. Anna Louise said she respected Marshall and would never do anything to harm him. Despite Anna Louise's calm demeanor and seemingly solid alibi, the detectives were not entirely convinced of her innocence. They believed she might know more than she was letting on. They decided to keep a close eye on her while they continued their investigation. Anna Louise Reed's involvement in the Tucker family's lives and her close relationship with Laney made her a key figure in the case. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to determine her role, if any, in Marshall's murder. On March 30, 2003, a week after Marshall Tucker's murder, the weather was clear and cool in Pacifica, California. Detectives Grant and Chua received a crucial tip from the forensic team. They discovered a series of incriminating messages on Laney's phone that linked Nate Harrison directly to the crime. These messages showed Nate's encouragement and guidance, proving he knew about Laney's plan to kill Marshall. Laney Tucker, 41, was the murderer. She had become obsessed with a twisted fantasy world she created, believing that Marshall's death was necessary to immortalize their love story. Laney's mental state had deteriorated to the point where she couldn't distinguish between fiction and reality. Her obsession with her violent stories drove her to bludgeon Marshall with an ornate candlestick from their living room. Detectives Grant and Chua realized that Nate Harrison, 39, was not just an innocent bystander. Nate had harbored secret feelings for Laney, and instead of preventing the murder, he manipulated the situation to make sure it happened. Nate believed that with Marshall out of the way, he could finally be with Laney. He provided Laney with the means to carry out the murder and helped her stage the burglary scene. The detectives reviewed the evidence and planned their approach. On the evening of March 30, they drove to Nate's house. The sky was clear, and the air was crisp. They knocked on Nate's door, and he answered, looking surprised to see them. Detective Grant told him they needed to talk about new evidence in the case. Inside, they showed Nate the messages and explained what they had found. Nate's face turned pale, and he tried to deny everything, but the evidence was too strong. Detective Chua calmly placed Nate under arrest for his involvement in Marshall's murder. Nate looked shocked and defeated as the handcuffs clicked around his wrist. Laney was also arrested at her home. She didn't resist and seemed almost relieved. When the detectives told her they knew the full story, she broke down, admitting that she believed Marshall's death was a tragic necessity for their love story. Marshall's family was devastated by the news of Laney and Nate's betrayal. They couldn't understand how the people closest to Marshall could do such a thing. The arrest of Laney and Nate brought a mix of grief and relief. They were heartbroken over the loss of Marshall, but relieved that justice would be served. The clear skies of March 30, 2003, marked a turning point in the case. The detectives had solved the mystery, bringing closure to Marshall Tucker's family and the community of Pacifica. The trial of Laney Tucker and May Harrison began on June 15, 2003, in the Pacifica Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters from local news stations like KTVU and the Pacifica Tribune. The public was eager to see justice served for the murder of Marshall Tucker. The prosecutor, Samantha Klein, 45, was known for her tough and determined nature. She presented a strong case against Laney and Nate, showing the jury the incriminating messages and evidence from the crime scene. Klein argued that Laney's delusional fantasy had led her to murder her husband, and that Nate had manipulated her to fulfill his own selfish desires. On the defense side was Robert Hayes, 50, a seasoned attorney known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind. He argued that Laney was mentally unstable and couldn't fully comprehend her actions. Hayes claimed that Nate's involvement was merely that of a misguided friend trying to help. He emphasized that Nate never directly participated in the murder. During the trial, the victim's family watched with heavy hearts. Marshall's parents, siblings, and children were present every day, hoping for justice. They listened intently as witnesses testified about Laney's erratic behavior and Nate's secret love for her. The emotional toll was evident as they struggled with the betrayal by people they had trusted. After weeks of testimony and arguments, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On July 1, 2003, they reached a verdict. Laney Tucker was found guilty of first-degree murder. Nate Harrison was found guilty of being an accessory to murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdicts were read. Judge Evelyn Carter, 55, delivered the sentences. Laney was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nate received a 25-year sentence for his role in the crime. Both sentences reflected the severity of their actions and the impact on Marshall's family. The sentencing brought mixed feelings among the victim's family and friends. While they were relieved that Laney and Nate were held accountable, the harsh reality of losing Marshall forever weighed heavily on them. They felt a sense of justice, but the pain of their loss remained. The trial and sentencing had a significant impact on the community of Pacifica. People discussed the case in cafes and on local radio stations like KGO. It served as a grim reminder of how quickly life could change and the importance of mental health awareness. The story of Marshall Tucker's murder and the subsequent trial left a lasting impression on everyone involved. It was a tragic tale of love, betrayal, and the search for justice in a quiet coastal town. After the trial, the community of Pacifica tried to return to normal. The events have left a deep scar, but people were determined to move forward. The Tucker family, especially, faced the challenge of rebuilding their lives without Marshall. Laney Tucker, now serving her life sentence, was transferred to the California Institution for Women. She received psychiatric treatment for her mental health issues. Laney spent her days writing and attending therapy sessions. She expressed remorse for her actions but knew she would never be able to undo the damage she had caused. Nate Harrison, sentenced to 25 years, was incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison. He struggled with guilt and regret, understanding the gravity of his manipulation. Nate's family distanced themselves from him, unable to comprehend his actions. It used his time in prison to reflect on his mistakes, participating in rehabilitation programs and counseling. The community of Pacifica held a memorial for Marshall Tucker every year on the anniversary of his death. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered to remember him and celebrate his life. The memorial became a symbol of the town's resilience and unity. Life in Pacifica slowly returned to normal, but the memory of Marshall Tucker and the lessons from his tragic death remained. The community, united by their shared grief, became stronger and more supportive of one another, determined to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. Melanie Varela, a 20-year-old from Sherbrooke, Quebec, found herself attending the University of Virginia and working as a nanny during her summer break. This dedicated and ambitious young woman was driven by her dreams of becoming a successful lawyer. Melanie had a loving family back in Canada and was known for her kind and compassionate nature. It was the summer of 1999, and Charlottesville, Virginia, was buzzing with excitement. The city was preparing for a concert at the University of Virginia's Scott Stadium. The event was highly anticipated, with fans flocking from all over the country to witness the renowned musical extravaganza. In the midst of this vibrant atmosphere, Melanie found herself employed by the wealthy Hartsfeld family. They were prominent members of the community who lived in a grand mansion on the outskirts of town, surrounded by sprawling gardens and a white picket fence. Melanie's days were filled with taking care of the Hartsfeld's child, Mei Ling, adopted from China. She would wake up early in the morning to prepare breakfast, help with school assignments, and engage in various outdoor activities. The girl adored Melanie, and she quickly became an integral part of their lives. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect family, there were whispers of tension and secrets. Rumors circulated among the local gossip mill, hinting at marital discord and financial troubles within the household. As the days turned into weeks, Melanie's curiosity grew. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Determined to uncover the truth, she discreetly began snooping around the house, searching for any clues that might shed light on the Thompsons' hidden secrets. Little did Melanie know her quest for the truth would lead her down a dark and treacherous path, forever changing the course of her life. On the ominous afternoon of June 2, 1999, the quiet town of Charlottesville, Virginia, was shrouded in an atmosphere of unease. Dark clouds ominously loomed overhead, mirroring the impending tragedy that was about to unfold. As the day wore on, tension mounted within the Hartsfeld residence. The once peaceful home now held a sinister secret, unbeknownst to Melanie Varela, a diligent and driven 20-year-old student from Sherbrooke, Quebec, who had been working as a nanny for the affluent Hartsfeld family during her summer break from the University of Virginia. Little did she know that her life was about to take a tragic turn, forever altering the lives of those around her. It was in the dimly lit basement of the Hartsfeld family's opulent mansion that Melanie's lifeless body was discovered. The shocking find was made by Jane La Salvador, a Brazilian maid employed by the family. Startled and trembling, Janela wasted no time in alerting the authorities, her voice quivering with fear as she recounted the horrifying scene she had stumbled upon. Gossip about Melanie's untimely demise spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community of Charlottesville. As the investigation unfolded, details would emerge. The basement, once a place of storage and solace, had become a haunting crime scene. The authorities meticulously combed through the area, searching for any clues that would shed light on the events leading to Melanie's tragic demise. In this small town, where everyone seemed to know each other, the tragic death of Melanie Varela shattered the illusion of safety. The once peaceful streets now felt haunted as the community grappled with the chilling reality that a dark secret had been lurking within their midst. On June 2, 1999, Charlottesville, Virginia, a city usually steeped in the idyllic charm of Southern history and academia, was rocked by a grisly discovery. In the basement of a stately home on the prestigious Maplewood Drive, the lifeless body of Melanie Varela, a 20-year-old University of Virginia student and part-time nanny, was found. The scene was one of unmitigated horror. Varela had been savagely murdered, her throat slit in a violent act that left the community reeling. The Charlottesville Police Department, led by seasoned detectives Smith and Ramirez, descended upon the Hartsfeld residence with a sense of urgency that matched the gravity of the crime. The family, prominent in local academic circles, was now at the center of a murder investigation that would grip the city for months to come. As the detectives navigated the blood-spattered basement, the evidence of a struggle was undeniable. Amidst the chaos, a picture of the victim began to emerge. Varela, known for her academic ambition and compassionate nature, had been living a double life with members of the Hartsfeld family. As the investigation unfolded, local media outlets like the Daily Progress and Duty Ina Radio provided coverage, drawing parallels to the infamous Ramsey case that had captivated the nation just a few years prior. The community, still reeling from the shock, could hardly believe that such a crime could occur in their midst, in a city where the biggest concerns were often which historical tour to take or whether the Cavaliers would win their next game. The case of Melanie Varela, with its blend of academic prestige and sordid secrets, would become a fixture in the annals of true crime in Charlottesville, a stark reminder that no place, no matter how picturesque, is immune to the darker aspects of human nature. In the quiet college town of Charlottesville, Virginia, a scandalous liaison turned deadly when Melanie Varela, a 20-year-old University of Virginia student, was found murdered. The prime suspect, James Hartsfeld, a 44-year-old physics professor renowned for his academic prowess, but now under scrutiny for his clandestine affairs. Hartsfeld, who had been nurturing a secret sexual relationship with Varela while she nannied his adopted daughter, Mei Ling, became the focal point of a sensational investigation. As detectives delved into the professor's private life, they uncovered a web of deceit that extended far beyond the ivy-covered walls of academia. The case, which unfolded in the summer of 1999, captivated the nation. It was a time when the world was gripped by the fear of the impending Y2K bug, and the media was still reeling from the sensational coverage of the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. Amidst this backdrop, the Hartsfield case emerged as a stark reminder of the dark underbelly of seemingly idyllic university life. Detectives Smith and Ramirez, seasoned investigators with the Charlottesville Police Department, interrogated Hartsfield with a calculated intensity. They probed his alibis, dissected his interactions with Varela, and scrutinized every facet of his personal life. Hartsfield's reactions, a volatile cocktail of anger and denial, only served to heighten suspicions. As the interrogation wore on, the evidence against Hartsfield mounted. A torn ticket stub from the hit movie The Matrix hinted at a premeditated alibi, and whispers of Hartsfield's affinity for the then-popular Tommy Hilfiger Hager painted a picture of a man caught between the facade of respectability and the allure of forbidden pleasures. The case against James Hartsfield was quickly becoming irrefutable, and the once-respected professor found himself ensnared in a narrative that seemed straight out of a Dateline mystery. As the investigation continued, the question on everyone's mind was whether justice would be served in the court of law or if the court of public opinion had already sealed Hartsfield's fate. In the serene town of Charlottesville, a veneer of tranquility was shattered by a heinous crime that gripped the community. Paula Hartsfield, a prominent figure in the literary circles of Charlottesville, Virginia, found herself entangled in a scandalous investigation following the brutal murder of Melanie Varela, a young man employed by the Hartsfield family. Paula, known for her erudite literary symposiums that often featured esteemed authors and captivated Charlottesville's intellectual elite, seemed an unlikely participant in such a sordid affair. Yet beneath the surface of her cultivated exterior, a different narrative was unfolding, one that would challenge the public's perception of her. The police, delving into the intricacies of Melanie's life, uncovered a clandestine sexual relationship between Paula and the victim. This revelation came as a shock to those who knew Paula as the wife of James Hartsfield, a respected physics professor, and the mother to Mei-Ling, their adopted daughter from China. During the interrogation, Paula's composure wavered under the weight of the detective's probing questions. Her unease was palpable, her answers laced with defensiveness. The detectives, seasoned in the art of discernment, noted the subtle shifts in her demeanor, her fleeting glances, the nervous tapping of her fingers, and the inconsistency in her recounting of the events leading up to Melanie's death. As the investigation deepened, the media frenzy intensified. Local news outlets like the Daily Progress began to speculate on the dynamics within the Hartsfield household. The community watched, riveted, as the case unfolded, bearing witness to a tragedy that would leave an indelible mark on the town's history. The scrutiny of Paula Hartsfield's role in this grim saga continued, with the authorities piecing together a timeline that suggested a motive rooted in jealousy and betrayal. The question on everyone's mind: could a woman of Paula's stature be capable of such a crime? Or was there more to the story than met the eye? In the investigation of Melanie Varela's murder, a pivotal discovery was made that would cast a new light on the case. The Charlottesville Police Department, in a meticulous search of the Hartsfield residence, uncovered a diary belonging to the victim. This personal journal, filled with sexually explicit details and confessions, became a key piece of evidence, revealing the complex web of relationships Melanie had entwined with each member of the Hartsfield family. The diary entries painted a vivid picture of Melanie's life and her interactions with each member of the family. It chronicled her secret sexual liaisons and the emotional turmoil that accompanied them. The police, combing through the pages, found references to clandestine meetings, sexual acts, and a growing sense of fear as Melanie became aware of the precariousness of her situation. Detectives Smith and Ramirez, leading the investigation, approached the diary with the precision of forensic analysts. They cross-referenced dates, events, and encounters, corroborating the diary's accounts with other collected evidence. The diary's revelations were damning, implicating not just one, but all members of the Hartsfield family in a sordid saga of manipulation and deceit. The media, including local outlets like WVIR-NBC 29, were quick to pick up on the story. The diary's contents became fodder for speculation and analysis as reporters dissected its entries, seeking to understand the motives behind the murder. As the diary's secrets unfolded, the community of Charlottesville watched in disbelief. The University of Virginia, an institution known for its honor code and academic integrity, was now at the center of a scandal that defied comprehension. The Hartsfeld family, once respected members of the academic and literary community, were now suspects in a crime that had shattered the peace of this quiet college town. The investigation into the brutal murder of Melanie Varela took a dramatic turn as attention shifted to Kevin Hartsfeld, the 22-year-old son of James and Paula Hartsfeld. A recent graduate from the University of Virginia, Kevin's involvement with Melanie was as complex as it was secretive. Detectives Smith and Ramirez, experienced in the psychological nuances of interrogation, sat across from Kevin in the store room at the Charlottesville Police Department. The air was thick with tension as they began their questioning, seeking to peel back the layers of Kevin's relationship with Melanie. Kevin, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, oscillated between anger and palpable fear. His voice, when he spoke, betrayed the turmoil within. The detectives pressed on, their questions sharp and unyielding, cutting to the heart of the matter. They probed for details about his illicit affair with Melanie, an affair that had been kept hidden from the prying eyes of the public. The interrogation revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. Kevin, like his parents, had been ensnared in a web of sexual deceit with Melanie. The police uncovered evidence of their sexual encounters, each one meticulously documented in a perverse scorecard the family maintained. The Hartsfeld residence, once a symbol of academic achievement and cultural sophistication, was now the epicenter of a scandalous murder investigation. The family's dark secret, once confined to the pages of Melanie's diary, was now laid bare for the world to see. With each passing moment, the walls closed in on Kevin Hartsfeld. The evidence mounted, and the reality of his situation became increasingly clear. The young man, who had once walked the halls of academia with pride, now faced the possibility of a life behind bars. In the quiet college town of Charlottesville, Virginia, a sinister plot unraveled within the walls of the Hartsfeld home, culminating in the tragic demise of Melanie Varela. The investigation into her murder took a dramatic turn when detectives uncovered the involvement of not one, but all three members of the Hartsfeld family. James Hartsfeld, a respected physics professor, his wife Paula, known for her literary gatherings, and their son Kevin, a recent college graduate, were all implicated in the crime. The trio had been entangled in a web of illicit sexual relationships with Melanie, each seeking to have secret sex with her in turn. Their clandestine sex was meticulously recorded in a scorecard of their sexual encounters with her, a chilling testament to the twisted sexual competition that had developed among them. The discovery of this scorecard was a pivotal moment in the case, as it exposed the lengths to which the Hartsfelds would go to maintain their facade of normalcy. Each point on the scorecard represented a sexual encounter with Melanie, reducing her to a mere object in their grotesque sex game. It was this dehumanizing treatment that ultimately led to her silence, permanently. As the community of Charlottesville grappled with the shock of such a heinous act occurring in their midst, the public watched in horror as the details of the case were laid bare, from the bloodstains in the basement to the disturbing entries in Melanie's diary. The Hartsfelds' motive was clear: to protect their secret at all costs. Their fear of exposure drove them to conspire against Melanie, leading to a brutal act of violence that would end her life and shatter the tranquility of Charlottesville. As the trial approached, legal experts weighed in on the case, speculating on the outcome and the potential sentences. The Hartsfelds faced the possibility of life in prison, a stark contrast to their previous lives of prestige and privilege. The case served as a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors, even in the most seemingly idyllic of settings. The police, after a meticulous investigation, pieced together the evidence that pointed unequivocally to the family's guilt in the murder of Melanie Varela. The day of reckoning came when law enforcement officials, armed with irrefutable proof, arrested James, Paula, and Kevin Hartsfeld. The scene was one of stark reality, as the family, once respected members of the community, were handcuffed and taken into custody. The surprise and resignation on their faces were palpable, a stark contrast to their previous academic and social standing. As the news of the arrest spread, local media outlets prepared to broadcast the story, drawing parallels to other infamous family crime sagas. The coverage was thorough, with journalists providing in-depth analysis of the case's impact on the small Virginia town. The victim's family, who had held onto hope from their home in Sherbrooke, Quebec, were now faced with a mix of relief and sorrow. The truth brought closure, but also a deep sense of loss for Melanie, whose aspirations and kindness were remembered by all who knew her. In the solemn halls of the Charlottesville courthouse, the trial of the Hartsfeld family unfolded like a narrative ripped from the pages of a crime thriller, capturing the rapt attention of the area, ensuring that not a single detail of the proceedings would escape the public eye. District Attorney Tina Arundel, known for her prosecutorial acumen, presented the case against the Hartsfelds with precision and clarity. The courtroom hummed on every word as she recounted the sordid details of the relationships between Melanie Varela and each member of the family, painting a picture of a household ensnared in its own web of deceit. Defense attorney Anne-Marie Gooseneck, renowned for her tenacious courtroom strategies, mounted a vigorous defense. She challenged the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that the evidence was circumstantial and the investigation flawed. Her arguments were crafted to sow doubt in the minds of the jurors, but the weight of the evidence was formidable. The prosecution's case was bolstered by the discovery of Melanie's diary, which became the silent witness to the tragedy. It revealed the intimate and exploitative nature of her relationships with James, Paula, and Kevin Hartsfeld, and the existence of a macabre scorecard that documented their encounters. As the trial progressed, the media coverage intensified. Local news outlets like WVIR-NBC 29 featured nightly segments, dissecting each day's testimony and offering expert legal analysis. The case had all the elements of a primetime drama: passion, betrayal, and a quest for justice. The victim's family, who had traveled from Sherbrooke, Quebec, sat in dignified grief, their presence a constant reminder of the life so brutally taken. They listened intently as the prosecution spoke of Melanie's aspirations and her vibrant spirit, now forever silenced. After days of testimony and deliberation, the moment of truth arrived. The jury, having weighed the evidence, found the Hartsfelds guilty on all counts. The sentence was swift and severe, reflecting the gravity of their crimes. The courtroom erupted in a cacophony of emotion as the verdict was read. The trial's conclusion brought closure to some, but for others, questions lingered. Had justice been served? Could anything compensate for the loss of a young woman with such promise? The Hartsfeld case would remain a topic of discussion in law schools, on social media platforms like Twitter, and in the quiet conversations of those who call Charlottesville home. As the gavel struck for the last time, the case of Melanie Varela closed, leaving behind a legacy of cautionary tales about the dangers of secrets and the pursuit of truth. The trial, a stark tableau of the consequences of unchecked desire and duplicity, left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. The aftermath of the Hartsfeld trial left an indelible mark on the community of Charlottesville. The once respected family faced the stark reality of their actions, as the gavel's final echo signified the end of their saga of a world where the pursuit of truth met the darkest human deeds. The police, lauded for their unwavering dedication, continued to serve as guardians of justice, their resolve strengthened by the case's outcome. The victim's family, hailing from the serene town of Sherbrooke, Quebec, embarked on a painful journey toward healing, their quest for closure intertwined with the memory of Melanie's vibrant life and tragic end. As the Hartsfelds began their sentences, the ripple effects of the trial extended beyond the courtroom. In Charlottesville, life slowly resumed its rhythm, but the shadows cast by the trial lingered. The case became a fixture in the town's lore, a cautionary tale of how secrets can unravel the fabric of a family and a community. The story of Melanie Varela and the Hartsfelds would not be forgotten, serving as a somber reminder of the fragility of trust and the price of deception. The case of Melanie Varela's murder sent shockwaves through Charlottesville, Virginia, in June of 1999. This true crime story exposed the depths of human deception and the tragic consequences that ensued. The first victim was Dana Carlisle, an 84-year-old woman who had a remarkable life story. Born in Flint, Michigan, in 1920, Dana grew up in a working-class family during the Great Depression. She had a natural talent for nursing and enrolled in the Army Nurse Corps at the age of 18. She was deployed to Europe during World War II, where she witnessed the horrors of war firsthand. She was one of the few nurses who survived the Battle of the Bulge, the deadliest battle in American history. She received several medals for her bravery and service. After the war, Dana continued her nursing career and worked in various hospitals and clinics across the country. She married her high school sweetheart, Frank Carlisle, and had 2 children, Mark and Lisa. She was a devoted mother and grandmother and always had a smile on her face. She loved to read, knit, and watch her favorite show, The Golden Girls. She was also an avid fan of the Detroit Tigers and never missed a game. Dana moved to the Raleigh Meadows nursing home in 2003 after her husband passed away from a heart attack. She wanted to be closer to her daughter, Lisa, who lived in Tampa. She quickly made friends with the other residents and the staff, who admired her cheerful attitude and her compassion for others. She was a leader and a mentor, and often organized activities and events for the nursing home. She had a dream of creating a safe and loving community for the elderly where they could enjoy their golden years with respect and dignity. But Dana's dream would be shattered one July day. Another elderly victim who had trusted their life to the staff of the Raleigh Meadows nursing home located in a quiet suburb of Pinellas Park. Someone had a sinister plan to end their lives, and the motive would be shocking. It was a scorching day in July of 2004 when a gruesome discovery was made at the Raleigh Meadows nursing home in Pinellas Park, Florida. The nursing home was a peaceful and comfortable place for the elderly, surrounded by palm trees and flowers. But on that day, a dark shadow fell over the facility as one of its residents was found murdered in her room. The victim was Dana Carlisle, an 84-year-old woman who had lived a remarkable life. She was a war hero, a nurse, a mother, and a friend to many. She had moved to the nursing home a year ago after losing her husband of 60 years. She had adjusted well to her new home and was loved by the staff and the other residents. She was always cheerful, kind, and helpful, and had a zest for life that was contagious. But someone had snuffed out that life in a brutal and senseless way. There were no signs of forced entry, robbery, or sexual assault. It seemed like a random and motiveless crime that left everyone baffled and terrified. The person who found Dana's body was Robert J. Murkowski, a 91-year-old man who was also a resident of the nursing home. Robert and Dana had become close friends after meeting at a bingo night. They shared a lot of interests and hobbies such as reading, gardening, and watching reruns of Matlock and Happy Days. They often had dinner together and chatted for hours. But his was shattered when he went to visit Dana in her room that morning. He knocked on her door, but there was no answer. He opened the door and saw her lying on her bed, motionless. He thought she was sleeping and gently called her name. But when he got closer, he realized she was not breathing. He touched her face and felt how cold she was. He screamed and ran to get help. The staff arrived soon after and confirmed that Dana was dead. Robert was in shock and could not stop crying. He told the staff everything he knew about Dana and how much he cared for her. He had no idea who would want hurt her or why. He was heartbroken and felt guilty for not being able to protect her. But Robert was not the only one who was grieving. The entire nursing home was in mourning and in fear. Dana was the first victim, but not the last. More residents would be killed in the next 2 weeks. The killer was still at large and had a twisted agenda. Who was behind these murders, and what was their motive? The answer would shock everyone and expose a web of lies, greed, and revenge. Within minutes of the discovery of Dana Carlisle's body, the police were on the scene at the Raleigh Meadows nursing home in Pinellas Park, Florida. The nursing home was a modern and spacious facility with a capacity of 120 residents. It had a reputation of providing quality care and comfort for the elderly, but on that day, it became the site of a horrific crime that would shock the community. The lead investigators of the case were Detective Jackson and Detective Rokeby, 2 seasoned and respected detectives from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. They had worked together for over a decade and had solved many high-profile cases, such as the infamous Clearwater serial killer, who had terrorized the city in 2002. They were known for their professionalism, dedication, and intuition. They arrived at the nursing home and were greeted by the staff and the residents, who were visibly shaken and distraught. They were escorted to Dana's room, where they found her lying on her bed, covered with a white sheet. They lifted the sheet and saw her pale and lifeless face. She looked peaceful, as if she had died in her sleep. But the detectives knew better. They noticed a small puncture mark on her arm and a syringe on the floor. They also found a bottle of pain pills on her nightstand with a prescription label that read, Dana Carlisle, OxyContin, 10 milligrams. Take one every 4 hours as needed for pain. The detectives quickly realized that Dana had been killed by an overdose of pain pills, a method that was unusual and suspicious. They wondered who had access to her medication and why they would want to harm her. They also wondered if there were any other victims, or if Dana was targeted for a specific reason. They had a lot of questions and few answers. They decided to interview the staff and the residents, and to review the security footage and the records of the nursing home. They hoped to find some clues and to catch the killer before they struck again. But they were too late. Dana was the first victim, but not the last. The killer was still on the loose and had a sinister plan. The investigation of the murder of Dana Carlisle, an 84-year-old resident of the Raleigh Meadows nursing home in Pinellas Park, Florida, took a shocking turn when the police identified the first suspect. He was Robert J. Murkowski, a 91-year-old man who was also a resident of the nursing home. He was not only Dana's friend, but also her secret lover. Their affair had started in 2001 when they were both married to other people. They had kept their relationship hidden from their spouses, their families, and their friends. Robert's wife, Helen, had died in 2002 after a long battle with Alzheimer's disease. She had been living in a different nursing home, where Robert had visited her every week. He had felt guilty for cheating on her, but he could not resist his feelings for Dana. He had hoped to start a new life with her after Helen's death. But Dana's husband, Frank, had outlived Helen by a year. He had suffered a heart attack in 2003 and had passed away in his sleep. He had been a loving and faithful husband to Dana, and a proud father and grandfather to their children and grandchildren. He had been unaware of Dana's affair and had trusted her completely. Dana had moved to the Raleigh Meadows nursing home in 2003 after Frank's death. She had wanted to be closer to her daughter, Lisa, who lived in Tampa. She had also wanted to be with Robert, who had moved there a few months earlier. They had finally been free to be together, without any secrets or lies. They had been happy and had enjoyed their time at the nursing home. They had also been sexually intimate many times and had expressed their love for each other. But their happiness was short-lived. On July 15, 2004, Dana was found dead in her room, killed by an overdose of pain pills. The police arrived at the scene and questioned Robert as a witness. He had been the one who had discovered her body and had called for help. He had claimed that he had gone to see her that morning, as he usually did, and had found her unresponsive. He had said that he had been shocked and saddened by her death, and that he had no idea who would want to harm her. But the police were not convinced by his story. They had noticed some inconsistencies and contradictions in his statements. They had also found some evidence that linked him to the crime. They had found his fingerprints on the syringe and the bottle of pain pills that had been used to kill Dana. They had also found a note in his room that read, "I'm sorry, Dana. I love you, but I can't live without you. Forgive me." They accused him of killing Dana out of jealousy or desperation. They speculated that he had feared that she would leave him, or that he had wanted to end their suffering. They interrogated him for hours, trying to get confession or a motive. But Robert remained calm and composed, and denied any involvement in the murder. He said that he loved Dana and that he would never hurt her. He said that the note was a suicide note that he had written a long time ago but had never acted on. He said that the fingerprints were a coincidence and that he had no access to the pain pills. He said that he was innocent and that someone else had killed Dana. But who and why? The police had no other suspects or leads. Was Robert really the killer, or was he a scapegoat? Was this a crime of passion or a cover-up? Was there more to this case than met the eye? The answer would shock everyone and reveal a dark and twisted plot that involved corruption, conspiracy, and revenge. The murder of Dana Carlisle, an 84-year-old resident of the Raleigh Meadows nursing home in Pinellas Park, Florida, was a shocking and tragic event. But it was only the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt the nursing home for weeks. The killer was not done yet and had a list of targets. The next victim was Robert J. Murkowski, a 91-year-old man who was also a resident of the nursing home. He was not only Dana's friend, but also her secret lover. Robert was under suspicion for Dana's murder, but he maintained his innocence. He said that he loved Dana and that he would never hurt her. He said that someone else had killed her and framed him. He said that he had no motive, no access, and no evidence. He said that he was a scapegoat and that the real killer was still on the loose. But the police did not believe him. They thought that he had killed Dana out of jealousy or desperation. They thought that he had feared that she would leave him or that he had wanted to end her suffering. To them, he was the killer, and they had caught him. But they were wrong. Robert was not the killer, but the next victim. He was found dead in his bed, also overdosed on pain pills, just 2 days after his arrest. His death confirmed the suspicions of the detectives. It was clear that these deaths were not suicides, but cold-blooded murders. The investigation took a sinister turn as the police realized that they were dealing with a serial killer within the nursing home. A serial killer who had a list of targets and a twisted agenda. A serial killer who was not done yet and who had identity that would shock everyone. The breakthrough in the investigation of the murders of Dana Carlisle and Robert J. Murkowski, 2 residents of the Raleigh Meadows nursing home in Pinellas Park, Florida, came on a stormy night when the police searched the nursing home for clues. They stumbled upon a hidden stash of secret recordings that revealed a dark and disturbing truth. The recordings were made by Carly Burgley, a 38-year-old single mother of 3 who worked as an aide at the nursing home. She had a secret hobby that involved recording the intimate and sexual moments of the residents without their consent or knowledge. She had installed hidden cameras and microphones in their rooms and had captured their most private and personal moments, including sex. She had then sold these recordings online, mainly to Japan, where there was a high demand for sexual material involving the elderly. She had made an estimated $15,000 from this illegal and immoral activity and had no remorse or guilt. But her scheme had backfired when she had recorded Dana and Robert. She had not known that they were lovers and had been surprised by their affair. She had also been afraid that they had discovered her secret and had threatened to expose her. She had panicked and had decided to kill them before they could ruin her. She had used her access to their medication and had injected them with a lethal dose of pain pills. She had then planted the evidence to make it look like Robert had killed Dana, and then himself. She had thought that she had gotten away with it and had continued her explicit recordings. But she had not counted on the police who had found her stash and had traced it back to her. They had exposed her as the killer and as the mastermind behind a sick and twisted business. In the midst of the investigation into the chilling series of murders at the Raleigh Meadows nursing home, a breakthrough occurred. The focus shifted to Carly Burgley, a 38-year-old single mother of 3 and an aide at the nursing home. As the police interrogated her, a complex and troubled past began to unravel. Carly's story was one of desperation and a relentless desire to provide for her family. It was revealed that she had a history of drug addiction, a battle she fought fiercely while trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. However, her involvement in the production and distribution of sexually explicit recordings added a sinister layer to her already troubled life. During the interrogation, Carly's emotions were palpable. Anger, fear, and regret danced across her face as she struggled to maintain composure. The weight of her actions bore down on her, and she knew that the consequences would be severe. The detectives pressed her for answers, seeking to unravel the truth hidden beneath her troubled exterior. The investigation took a dark turn as the police delved further into Carly's life. They discovered a web of connections, linking her to a network of individuals involved in the production and distribution of secret sexually explicit materials, specifically of the elderly. It was a world shrouded in secrecy, operating under the radar of law enforcement. As the media caught wind of the case, news blared with sensationalism. The local newspaper, the Pinellas Park Gazette, dedicated coverage to the shocking revelations, captivating the community. As the investigation continued, the detectives meticulously pieced together the puzzle, uncovering the truth behind the series of murders. The case would go down in history as one of the most shocking and disturbing crimes to rock Pinellas Park. After months of investigation, the police finally cracked the case of the nursing home murders. The killer was none other than Carly Burgley, a 38-year-old aide who worked at the Raleigh Meadows nursing home. She was arrested on July 29, 2004, and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Carly Burgley had a dark secret that she was desperate to hide. She was involved in a lucrative but illegal business of making and selling sexually explicit recordings of the elderly residents to Japan. She used hidden cameras and microphones to capture the intimate moments of the unsuspecting victims. The first of her targets was Dana Carlisle, an 84-year-old former nurse who served in World War II. Dana was a beloved figure at the nursing home, known for her kindness and compassion. She had a secret romance with Robert J. Murkowski, a 91-year-old widower. Carly Burgley saw them as an opportunity to make more money and recorded their sexual encounters. However, Carly's scheme was almost discovered by Dana. Carly panicked and decided to silence Dana by overdosing her on pain pills. She staged the scene to look like a suicide and hoped to escape suspicion. But Robert, who found Dana's body, was heartbroken and suspicious. He told the police that Dana would never kill herself and that he suspected foul play. Carly realized that Robert was a loose end and decided to eliminate him as well. She used the same method of overdosing him on pain pills and made it look like another suicide. But the police were not convinced. They noticed the similarities between the 2 deaths and launched a thorough investigation. They found traces of Carly's fingerprints and DNA on the pill bottles and the victims' bodies. They also discovered her hidden stash of recordings and traced her connection to a Japanese website, karaishasexy.jp. The police arrested Carly Burgley and had charged her with 2 counts of first-degree murder and several counts of invasion of privacy, extortion, and fraud. They had also seized her recordings and had contacted the authorities in Japan to track down the buyers. She claimed that she was driven by financial desperation and that she loved her family. She said that she regretted her actions and asked for forgiveness. But the police and the victims' families were not moved by her words. They said that she was a cold-blooded killer who preyed on the vulnerable and betrayed their trust. The courtroom drama unfolded as the trial of Carly Burgley, the accused murderer of the Raleigh Meadows nursing home killings, reached its climax. The prosecution, led by the relentless prosecutor, Janet Carolborg, presented a compelling case against Burgley. With attention to detail, Carolborg painted a vivid picture of the events that unfolded in the sweltering summer of July 2004. The trial, held in the Pinellas Park Courthouse, drew significant local media attention. Journalists from local newspapers, such as the Pinellas Tribune, were eager to report on the sensational case. The families of the victims, Dana Carlisle and Robert J. Murkowski, sat anxiously in the gallery, hoping for justice to be served. The prosecution's case relied heavily on forensic evidence and eyewitness testimonies. Expert witnesses, including renowned medical examiner Dr. Samantha Collins, testified about the cause of death and the presence of pain pills in the victims' bodies. The prosecution also presented phone records and surveillance footage from the nursing home, which placed Burgley at the scene of the crimes. Defense attorney Janelle Lavrov, known for his fierce advocacy, fought tirelessly to protect his client's rights. Lavrov argued that the evidence against Burgley was circumstantial and lacked a direct link to the murders. He questioned the credibility of the witnesses and raised doubts about the motives attributed to Burgley. Finally, after careful deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. The judge, Honorable Paul Thompson, announced that Carly Burgley was found guilty on multiple counts of murder. Gasps filled the courtroom as the families of the victims embraced each other, finding solace in the knowledge that justice had been served. As Burgley was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the media frenzy intensified. News outlets across Tampa Bay reported on the trial, dissecting the evidence and analyzing the motives behind the killings. The case became a cautionary tale, highlighting the need for increased security measures in nursing homes and the potential dangers of hidden secrets. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of all those involved were forever changed. The shocking series of murders that took place at the Raleigh Meadows nursing home in Pinellas Park, Florida, in July of 2004 left a lasting impact on the community and beyond. Journalists from across the Tampa area flocked to Pinellas Park, eager to report on the sensational details of the trial. The local newspaper, the Pinellas Park Gazette, dedicated coverage to the trial with headlines like "Justice Served," "Burgley Convicted of Murder," and "The Burgley Trial. A Community's Healing Begins." The impact of these horrific crimes extended beyond the courtroom. The Raleigh Meadows nursing home, once a place of care and comfort, became infamous in the community. The residents and their families were left questioning the safety and security of nursing homes across the country. The tragedy prompted a conversation about the need for stricter regulations and oversight in elder care facilities. In response to the murders, the Raleigh Meadows nursing home implemented a series of security measures to prevent future tragedies. The facility installed state-of-the-art surveillance cameras, increased staff training on recognizing signs of abuse or neglect, and implemented stricter visitor policies. These changes aim to restore trust within the community and ensure the safety and well-being of the residents. As the years passed, the wounds inflicted by these heinous crimes slowly began to heal. The victims' families found solace in knowing that justice had been served, while the community rallied together to support one another through the difficult process of healing. The memory of the Raleigh Meadows nursing home murders remains a somber reminder of the need for vigilance and compassion in caring for our elderly population. In this episode of True Crime Case Files, we delved into the chilling series of murders that struck the Raleigh Meadows nursing home. The lives of Dana Carlisle and Robert J. Murkowski were tragically cut short by Carly Burgley, a single mother driven by desperation and a dark secret. As we reflect on this harrowing tale, let us remember the victims and the resilience of those who survived. Stay tuned for more gripping true crime stories on True Crime Case Files. Willie Tanners, 49, was a well-known and respected figure in the small southern town of Tifton, Georgia. He owned Tanner's Hardware, a local store that had been serving the community for over 2 decades. Known for its friendly service and wide selection of tools and supplies, Tanner's Hardware was the kind of place where neighbors could count on finding what they needed. Whether it was a simple screwdriver or advice on how to fix a leaky faucet, Willie was often seen behind the counter, greeting customers with a warm smile and chatting about everything from the weather to last night's episode of Jeopardy! Willie's life appeared ideal to those who knew him. He was married to Lynn Tanners, 48, his high school sweetheart, and the couple was often involved in local church activities and charity events. They lived in a modest but well-kept home, decorated for the holidays with twinkling lights and a wreath on the front door. However, beneath this seemingly perfect exterior, Willie was hiding a dark secret. Despite his reputation as a devoted husband and upstanding citizen, Willie had become involved in a secret affair with Madison Kelly, an 18-year-old high school senior. Madison, known for her striking looks and intelligence, was a regular customer at the hardware store. Over time, a friendship developed that quickly turned into a sexual relationship. Torn between guilt and desire, Willie struggled with his conscience as the holiday season approached. He knew the affair was wrong, but he was unable to break free from the emotional entanglement that had developed. The relationship was torrid and extremely intense, with Willie struggling between his guilt and his growing attachment to Madison. In the days leading up to his death, Willie had been distant and distracted, trying to maintain the facade of a loving husband while battling his inner turmoil. As Christmas approached in December 2019, Willie's behavior began to change. He became more distant, spending less time at home, and more time working late. Lynn noticed the change but attributed it to the stress of running the business during the busy holiday season. Friends and neighbors also noticed that Willie seemed preoccupied, no longer as cheerful as he once was. But no one could have imagined the storm brewing beneath the surface, a storm that would soon shatter the peace of their small town. It was the morning of December 22, 2019, just a few days before Christmas. Tifton, Georgia was quiet, with most of the town's residents finishing their holiday shopping or decorating their homes. Around 9:00 a.m., Lynn Tanners, Willie's wife, was returning home from her Sunday morning church service at First Baptist Church, where she had volunteered to help prepare for the upcoming Christmas Eve service. she noticed Willie's truck parked in the driveway, which struck her as odd since he had mentioned needing to pick up some last-minute supplies for the store. When Lynn entered their home on Bride Street, the first thing she noticed was the smell of fresh pine from the Christmas tree they had decorated together. The tree was still lit with colorful lights, and underneath it were neatly wrapped presents, some with her name on them. But something was off. The house was eerily silent, and Willie didn't respond when she called out his name. As Lynn walked into the living room, she was met with a sight that would haunt her forever. Willie's lifeless body lay on the floor near the Christmas tree, surrounded by shattered ornaments and tinsel. His head was soaked in blood, as if it were an enchilada, and a hammer lay nearby, covered in what she could only assume was her husband's blood. Lynn dropped to her knees, her body shaking as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Panic set in, but Lynn forced herself to stay calm enough to call 911. Her voice trembled as she explained the situation to the operator, tears streaming down her face. "Oh my lordy, my husband's not breathing. There's blood everywhere," she cried. The operator tried to keep her calm, instructing her not to touch anything and to wait outside for the police and paramedics. Within minutes, the quiet street was filled with the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. Neighbors peeked out from their windows, whispering to each other and speculating about what had happened. Lynn sat on the front porch, numb and in shock, unable to comprehend how her life had changed in an instant. The Tifton Police Department arrived on the scene within minutes of Lynn Tanner's 911 call. Leading the investigation was Detective Nora Collins, a seasoned officer with over 15 years of experience. Known for her sharp instincts and methodical approach, Detective Collins was respected by her peers and feared by criminals. As she stepped out of her unmarked cruiser, she was immediately struck by the contrast between the festive decorations on the Tanner's home and the grim scene awaiting her inside. The living room was a disturbing mix of holiday cheer and brutal violence. Christmas lights twinkled on the tree, reflecting off the shattered ornaments scattered across the floor. Willie Tanner's body lay near the base of the tree, his head caved in, like a half-eaten burrito, from what appeared to be multiple blows with a hammer. Blood had spattered across the nearby gifts, soaking the wrapping paper and ribbons. Detective Collins took in the scene, her mind racing as she began to piece together what might have happened. The hammer, still lying beside Willie's body, was immediately bagged as evidence. The crime scene was bloody, but it was also oddly confined. There were no signs of a struggle beyond the immediate area around the tree. It was as if Willie had been caught completely off guard. The forensic team arrived shortly after, led by Dr. Philip K. Wang, a meticulous and detail-oriented medical examiner who was known for his precise work. Dr. Wang began examining Willie's body, noting the severe head trauma that had likely caused instant death. He estimated the time of death to be between 10:00 p.m. and midnight the previous evening, based on the state of rigor mortis. Detective Collins directed her team to collect every possible piece of evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, took photographs, and searched for any other clues that might point to the killer. She also interviewed Lynn Tanners, who was still in shock but managed to provide a basic timeline of her morning and Willie's activities the previous day. As the investigation unfolded, Detective Collins couldn't shake the feeling that this was a crime of passion. The brutality of the attack suggested deep anger or jealousy, emotions that often fueled such violent outbursts. But who could have hated Willie Tanners enough to kill him in such a brutal way? That was the question Collins was determined to answer. The first person Detective Nora Collins decided to investigate was Madison Kelly, the 18-year-old high school senior who had also been the secret lover of Willie Tanners. Madison was known around Tifton as a bright student with a promising future. She was involved in several extracurricular activities, including the school's drama club, where she had recently wowed audiences as Tiny Tim in a local production of A Christmas Carol. But beneath her polished exterior, Madison was emotionally fragile, a trait that had become more apparent in recent months. Madison lived with her mother, Tammy Kelly, in a small but tidy house on the outskirts of town. The Kellys were known for keeping to themselves, and Tammy was known in the community for being controlling and obsessed with her daughter's appearance, especially her husband. Madison's father had left the family after coming out as gay. When Detective Collins arrived at the Kelly residence on the afternoon of December 22, she found Madison, still dressed in her jammies, in her bedroom, visibly shaken by the news of Willie's death. The room was a typical teenager's sanctuary, filled with posters of pop stars like Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande, but there were also signs of Madison's obsession with Willie. Detective Collins noticed a framed shirtless photo of Willie on Madison's nightstand, and her journals were filled with graphic entries about their sexual relationship. During the interview, Madison was initially cooperative but quickly became emotional when questioned about her relationship with Willie. She admitted to the affair, describing how they had grown close over the past year. Madison revealed that she had fallen deeply in love with Willie and had even fantasized about a future together. However, as Christmas approached, Willie had become distant, and she feared he was planning to end their relationship. When Detective Collins pressed Madison on her whereabouts the night of the murder, Madison hesitated before claiming she had been home alone, studying for her final exams. Her alibi was weak, and her emotional state raised red flags for Collins. Madison's tears and trembling hands indicated that she was under immense stress, but whether it was from guilt or grief was unclear. As the interview continued, Madison's demeanor shifted from sorrowful to defensive. She insisted she had nothing to do with Willie's death and began to speak erratically, blaming a mysterious man she called Bob for influencing her actions. Madison claimed that Bob had convinced her to pursue a sexual relationship with Willie or else he would torture her, but when pressed for more details, she became evasive and confused. Detective Collins was unconvinced by Madison's story. The combination of her emotional instability, obsession with Willie, and weak alibi made her a prime suspect. However, Collins knew she needed more concrete evidence before she could make an arrest. The investigation into Madison Kelly was far from over, and Collins was determined to uncover the truth behind Willie Tanner's tragic death. The second person on Detective Nora Collins' list was Lynn Tanners, Willie's wife of 25 years. Lynn was a well-known figure in Tifton, recognized for her deep involvement in the community and church activities. She was a warm and friendly woman, always greeting neighbors with a smile and often hosting gatherings at their home. Despite the outward appearance of a happy marriage, Detective Collins knew that Lynn had long harbored suspicions about Willie's fidelity. Lynn had spent the days leading up to the murder preparing for Christmas. She had been busy with church events, including the upcoming Christmas Eve service at First Baptist Church. To the outside world, it seemed like Lynn was focused on her faith and family, but inside, she was troubled by a growing sense of unease. She had noticed Willie's increasing absences, which he often explained away as work-related or part of his commitment to the church. However, Lynn couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When Detective Collins interviewed Lynn on December 22, Lynn was still in shock from discovering her husband's body that morning. Sitting at the kitchen table, Lynn recounted her marriage to Willie, describing him as a loving husband, but also admitting that they had grown distant and sexless in recent years, especially after their son Rifle left for college. She confessed that she had suspected Willie of having an affair after he kept turning down her requests for sex, but had no proof. Lynn's eyes welled up with tears as she spoke about the strain it had put on their relationship, particularly in the last few months. Detective Collins asked Lynn about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Lynn stated that she had been at home, preparing for the next day's church service. She had gone to bed early, assuming Willie would join her later, but when she woke up in the middle of the night and realized he wasn't there, she assumed he had fallen asleep in the living room. It wasn't until the next morning that she discovered the gruesome truth. Lynn's account of the evening was straightforward, but Detective Collins couldn't ignore the possibility that Lynn's suspicions about Willie's affair could have driven her to commit the murder. The brutal nature of the crime suggested a deeply personal motive, and as the wife of the victim, Lynn had both the opportunity and a potential reason to kill. However, Lynn's grief appeared genuine, and her cooperation with the investigation was unwavering. She answered all of Collins' questions without hesitation and even provided access to Willie's personal belongings, including his phone and computer. Still, Collins knew that emotions could be powerful motivators, and she wasn't ready to rule Lynn out as a suspect just yet. The investigation continued, with Collins keeping a close eye on every detail of Lynn's story. The third person Detective Nora Collins needed to investigate was Tammy Kelly, the mother of Madison Kelly, and a woman with a strong-willed, controlling personality. Tammy was known around Tifton as a perfectionist, always concerned with appearances and maintaining a strict household, especially after her husband left her after coming out of the closet. She was active in the community, often organizing events at the local church, but her primary focus was on her daughter, Madison. Tammy's relationship with Madison had always been strained. Madison, who was young, beautiful, and full of sexual potential, had been the subject of Tammy's obsessive fear and attention. Tammy's control over Madison extended to every aspect of her life, from the clothes she wore to her social interactions. It was well known among their neighbors that Tammy had high expectations for her daughter and was often harsh when those expectations weren't met. Rumors had circulated that Tammy disciplined Madison severely, with one particularly disturbing story claiming that Tammy whipped Madison whenever she thought her daughter's appearance was too attractive to men in the community. Detective Collins approached Tammy on December 23, the day after Willie Tanner's body was found. Tammy was at home, seemingly unfazed by the events of the past day. She welcomed Collins into her clean living room, decorated with traditional Christmas decorations, including a perfectly trimmed tree and a nativity scene. Tammy was calm and composed as she spoke, but there was an underlying tension in her demeanor. Collins began the interview by asking Tammy about her relationship with Willie. Tammy was quick to praise Willie, describing him distantly as a good man and a pillar of the community. However, as the conversation shifted to Madison, Tammy's tone became more guarded. She admitted that she had been angered about Madison's recent behavior, noting that her daughter had begun wearing makeup and a bra in the weeks leading up to the murder. When Collins pressed Tammy about whether she knew of Madison's sexual relationship with Willie, which was exactly what she was trying to prevent, Tammy's composure faltered slightly. She denied any knowledge of the affair, but admitted that she had noticed Madison had begun to dress like a harlot, in Tammy's words. Tammy claimed that she had tried to talk to Madison about it, but her daughter had brushed her off, insisting everything was fine. Collins couldn't ignore the possibility that Tammy's jealousy and need for control could have driven her to commit the murder. Tammy's intense need for control of her daughter, combined with the potential scandal of Madison's sexual affair with a much older man, her worst nightmare, gave her a possible motive. However, Tammy remained cool and collected throughout the interview, showing no signs of guilt or remorse. She was polite and cooperative, but offered little useful information. As Collins left the Kelly home, she knew Tammy couldn't be dismissed as a suspect. The investigation was growing more complex, with each suspect revealing new layers of potential motives and secrets. But without hard evidence, Collins was still piecing together the puzzle. On December 24, 2019, just one day before Christmas, the investigation took a significant turn. It was a cold, gray morning in Tifton, Georgia, with temperatures hovering around the low 40s. Detective Nora Collins and her team were back at the Tanners' residence, meticulously combing through every inch of the crime scene, determined to find any clue they might have missed. As the team searched the house, one officer noticed something odd near the fireplace. Amidst the neatly wrapped Christmas presents, he found a small, torn piece of paper partially tucked under the rug. The paper appeared to be a handwritten note, but only a fragment was legible. It read, "Dirty boy, meet me at," followed by a time, 10:00 p.m., and the initials MK. This discovery immediately caught Detective Collins' attention. The initials MK seemed to match those of Madison Kelly, Willie's secret lover. The time mentioned in the note also coincided with the estimated time of Willie's death. Collins realized that this could be the key piece of evidence that linked Madison directly to the crime scene on the night of the murder. Collins quickly ordered a forensic analysis of the note, hoping to determine if the handwriting matched Madison's. The note was sent to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation in Atlanta for further examination. Meanwhile, Collins decided to revisit Madison's home to search for anything that might tie her to the note or the crime. While at the Kelly residence, Collins and her team found a notebook in Madison's bedroom, hidden under her mattress. The notebook was filled with disturbing entries about her obsession with Willie, including plans to meet him in secret. One of the entries, dated December 22, matched the time and place mentioned in the torn note found at the Tanner's house. This new evidence was crucial. It not only placed Madison at the scene of the crime, but also provided a motive driven by jealousy and obsession. Collins felt that the case was beginning to come together, with the puzzle pieces finally falling into place. Back at the station, the forensic analysis confirmed that the handwriting on the note matched Madison's. This was the break Collins had been waiting for. With this new evidence, the focus of the investigation narrowed sharply on Madison Kelly, making her the prime suspect in Willie Tanner's murder. As the investigation progressed, all signs began pointing toward Madison Kelly, Willie's 18-year-old secret lover. The small town of Tifton, Georgia, was already reeling from the news of Willie's brutal murder, but what emerged from the investigation shocked everyone even more. Madison's obsessive love for Willie had been building for months. As the holiday season approached, her fear of being abandoned grew stronger. She was terrified that Willie, A man more than twice her age would leave her behind to focus on his family during Christmas. The thought of losing him consumed her, driving her into a jealous rage. On the night of December 21, 2019, Madison decided to confront Willie at his home. Desperate for reassurance that he still loved her, she did something drastic. She took off all her clothes and begged him to have sex with her right then and there in the middle of the living room. Willie, already feeling the pressure of his double life and fearing that his wife would find out, panicked. He tried to end the relationship, fearing exposure and the consequences it would bring to both their lives. But this only pushed Madison over the edge. In a moment of uncontrollable fury, Madison snapped. In a moment of uncontrollable fury, she grabbed a hammer that Willie had planned to use for hanging Christmas lights and beat him to death with it. The scene was gruesome, with the festive decorations in the living room contrasting sharply with the violence of the crime. After the murder, Madison knew she was in deep trouble. In a desperate attempt to avoid punishment, she concocted a bizarre story. She feigned having early-onset schizophrenia, claiming that a secret lover named Bob had been manipulating her for years. According to her elaborate tale, Bob was a high-ranking politician involved in wild sex rituals and secret satanic and Wiccan practices. Madison insisted that Bob had forced her into a life of sin and ultimately commanded her to kill Willie. The police, however, were unimpressed by her story. Detective Nora Collins, who had been leading the investigation, saw through the lies. Despite Madison's attempts to shift the blame, the evidence was clear. The handwriting on the note found at the crime scene matched Madison's, and her obsessive entries in her notebook painted a picture of a young woman consumed by jealousy and rage. When confronted with the evidence, Madison tried to change her story. She claimed that Bob was merely a voice in her head, that she was mentally ill, and that she hadn't been in control of her actions. But the police didn't buy it. They believed she was lying to cover up her crime. On December 26, 2019, Madison Kelly was officially arrested for the murder of Willie Tanners. She was taken into custody without incident, her demeanor eerily calm as she was led away in handcuffs. The town of Tifton was left in shock, struggling to comprehend how a young woman with such a bright future could commit such a heinous act. Willie's family, devastated by the loss, found some solace in the fact that the person responsible for his death was finally behind bars. But the pain of his absence, especially during the holiday season, was something they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The trial of Madison Kelly began in early February 2020. The small town of Tifton, Georgia, was gripped by the case, with many locals following every detail closely. The courtroom was packed as the prosecution and defense presented their cases. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Robert Whitman, a seasoned attorney known for his no-nonsense approach, argued that Madison's crime was premeditated. Whitman, 52, described how Madison's obsession with Willie Tanners had reached a dangerous level, leading her to commit a brutal murder when he tried to end their affair. He emphasized the cold, calculated nature of the crime, pointing to the evidence that Madison had brought the hammer with her, fully intending to use it. Whitman also dismissed Madison's claims of mental illness, calling it a desperate attempt to escape justice. On the other side, the defense attorney, Karen Blackwell, 45, who was known for her compassionate yet sharp legal mind, argued that Madison was mentally unstable at the time of the murder. Blackwell claimed that Madison had suffered from a psychotic break, driven by the fear of losing Willie and the intense pressure of their secret relationship. She asked the jury to consider Madison's troubled home life and the influence it had on her mental state. Blackwell painted a picture of a vulnerable young woman who had been manipulated by an older man and who had finally snapped under the pressure. Throughout the trial, Willie's family sat in the front row, their faces etched with grief. They listened quietly as the details of Willie's double life were laid bare for the world to see. The pain of his betrayal was clear, but so was their deep sorrow at his loss. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. On February 18, 2020, Madison Kelly was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The sentence brought mixed reactions. Some felt it was too lenient given the brutality of the crime, while others believed it was a fair acknowledgement of Madison's youth and troubled mental state. Willie's family expressed relief that the trial was over, but knew that the scars of this tragedy would remain with them forever. After the trial concluded, life in Tifton, Georgia, slowly began to return to normal, though the memory of the crime lingered. Willie Tanner's hardware store, once a bustling hub in the community, closed its doors for good. Without Willie to run it, his family decided they couldn't keep the business going. The closure marked the end of an era for the small town, leaving a hole in the community that was difficult to fill. Madison Kelly was transferred to a state prison, where she began serving her 25-year sentence. Despite her attempts to feign mental illness during the trial, the prison's psychiatric evaluations found no evidence of schizophrenia or any other condition that would have explained her actions. Madison spent her days in relative isolation, with few visitors. Her once promising future was now a distant memory, replaced by the reality of a life behind bars. Lynn Tanners, Willie's widow, struggled to cope with the revelations about her husband's double life. The knowledge that Willie had been unfaithful with an 18-year-old girl was a heavy burden to bear. Despite the support of her church community, Lynn withdrew from public life, choosing to grieve in private. She eventually sold the family home and moved to a nearby town, hoping for a fresh start away from the memories that haunted her. Tammy Kelly, Madison's mother, faced her own challenges after the trial. The scandal had brought shame upon her family, and Tammy's once ironclad grip on her daughter's life had shattered. Tammy became a pariah in the community, with many blaming her controlling nature for Madison's downfall. She, too, retreated from public view, avoiding the judgmental stares of her neighbors. For the residents of Tifton, the events of December 2019 serve as a stark reminder that even in a close-knit community, secrets can fester and lead to tragedy. The town's Christmas celebrations that year were muted, as the memory of Willie Tanner's murder cast a long shadow over the holiday season. It would take years for the community to heal, and even then, the story of Madison Kelly and Willie Tanners would be remembered as one of the darkest chapters in Tifton's history. Cody McAllister was a 29-year-old software developer working at Cisco in Santa Rosa, California. He was known for his dry wit, his love of classic cars, and his attention to detail. His friends described him as both a bit of a perfectionist and someone with a warm, caring side. He was proud of his career at Cisco, and with Silicon Valley booming in 2019, Cody's future looked bright. He was the oldest of two siblings, with a younger sister named Rachel. The two had always had a complicated relationship, with Rachel's rebellious nature and twin drug and alcohol addictions clashing against Cody's sober, structured life. Despite their differences, Cody had always tried to support his sister, especially when their parents passed away a few years earlier. Cody had always wanted to find the perfect partner, and in early 2019, he finally found her in Lily, a freelance fashion designer. Their relationship was intense and moved fast. Within months, they were married. Friends and family were surprised at how quickly everything happened. Cody was usually more careful, but he believed he had found the one. Lily was calm, stylish, and creative. A stark contrast to Cody's tech-focused world where a clean hoodie was the height of fashion. The two seemed like a perfect match on the outside, but there were signs of trouble that Cody's close friends noticed. He seemed more anxious in the days leading up to his death, though no one could put their finger on why. In the days before he died, Cody was still going about his usual routine. He worked late on some big projects for Cisco and had been chatting excitedly with friends about an upcoming trip he was planning for his first wedding anniversary with Lily. They were looking at places like Napa Valley or maybe a quiet weekend in Carmel by the Sea. Cody had also been thinking about the future, possibly starting a family, buying a bigger house, and settling down. But there were also private struggles that Cody was dealing with. He had always had trust issues in relationships, and there were rumors that his marriage wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Still, Cody seemed hopeful that things would improve and that his new life with Lily was the fresh start he had been waiting for. It was the morning of November 18, 2019, when Cody McAllister's body was discovered. At around 7:30 a.m., Lily McAllister, Cody's wife, called 911 saying she had found her husband dead in their condo. The couple lived in a modern, upscale unit in a trendy part of San Jose, not far from Santana Row, an area known for its high-end shops and restaurants. Lily had woken up early and realized Cody wasn't in bed. She told police that after searching the apartment, she found him in the laundry room. When Lily found Cody, he was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. His body had multiple stab wounds, with the fatal blow being to his chest. His arms were limp at his sides and cut up, and the laundry room was in disarray, with clothes scattered around, signaling a violent struggle had taken place. The washer and dryer, both high-end models, were splattered with blood and smelled like old meat rather than clean clothes. Lily was described as calm when she spoke to the 911 operator, though she sounded shaky at times, clearly in shock from what she had found. The first responders arrived within minutes of the call. Officer Mark Tran was the first on the scene, followed closely by his partner, Officer Emily Reyes. They quickly secured the area and began checking for signs of life. Unfortunately, Cody was already cold to the touch. Lily was taken outside and questioned briefly by Officer Reyes, who noted that while Lily appeared upset, she wasn't crying and seemed distant. The officers then called for backup, and the crime scene investigation team arrived shortly after. Neighbors later told reporters that they hadn't heard anything unusual that morning. The walls in the condo building were thick, and it wasn't uncommon for city noise to drown out the sounds from nearby apartments. The couple was relatively new to the building, so no one knew them well, but most described Cody as polite and quiet. They hadn't seen much of Lily, but one neighbor, an older woman who lived across the hall, said she had seen her at the grocery store just the day before. By the time detectives arrived, the building was cordoned off with yellow police tape, and the investigation was in full swing. Cody's body was taken to the coroner's office, and Lily was brought in for questioning. No one could have guessed at the secrets that were about to come to light. The San Jose Police Department arrived swiftly after Lily McAllister's 911 call on the morning of November 18, 2019. Detectives James O'Brien and Lisa Chang, both veterans with the department, were assigned to the case. O'Brien was known for his methodical approach and no-nonsense attitude, while Chang had a reputation for being sharp and detail-oriented. Together, they walked into the upscale condo, ready to piece together what had happened to Cody McAllister. The crime scene was gruesome. The laundry room was small, with Cody's body lying near the door, face up, surrounded by a large pool of blood. Clothes were scattered everywhere. Socks, shirts, and towels were tossed haphazardly on the floor, some of them soaked in blood. It was clear there had been a struggle. A bloody steak knife, likely the murder weapon, was found a few feet away from Cody's body. It had a black ergonomic handle, common in many households, but now stained with clotted blood. The detectives noted the washer and dryer, both covered in spatter, and a few bloody handprints on the doorframe, indicating Cody had likely tried to defend himself. Detective Chang immediately began cataloging evidence. She directed the forensic team to take samples of the blood, check for fingerprints, and look for any signs of forced entry. The laundry room wasn't particularly large, so it didn't take long for the investigators to collect evidence. They used special blue lights to search for additional traces of blood in other parts of the house, but it seemed the attack had been confined to the laundry room. Outside, officers canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had heard or seen anything suspicious, but no significant leads emerged. O'Brien focused on the timeline. The couple had been married for less than a year, and according to Lily, everything had seemed fine. However, the signs of a violent argument were impossible to ignore. There were no signs of a break-in, which suggested that Cody had possibly known his attacker. As they pieced together the evidence, the detectives began to consider the possibility of a domestic dispute gone horribly wrong. The medical examiner later confirmed that Cody had been stabbed 3 times, with the fatal wound being a deep cut to his chest, severing his aorta. The coroner's report indicated that Cody likely died within minutes of the attack. Meanwhile, the detectives continued to search the rest of the condo for more clues, but nothing else seemed out of place. The scene, while chaotic, appeared personal. This definitely wasn't a random attack. The first suspect police turned to was Cody's wife, Lily McAllister, who had made the 911 call reporting the murder. At 32, Lily worked as a freelance fashion designer and had built a modest reputation in the local creative scene for her bold and unique designs. Her quiet, enigmatic personality drew people in, but many who knew her said she kept much of her personal life private. She had met Cody just over a year before, and their relationship had moved quickly to marriage, surprising some of their friends. During her initial interrogation on November 18, 2019, Lily appeared calm but visibly shaken. She told detectives that she had found Cody's body after returning from a quick morning walk. She claimed their marriage had been mostly happy, though she admitted they had their share of arguments, especially recently. As Detective O'Brien questioned her, Lily became more emotional, but her story remained consistent. She repeatedly stated that she had no idea who could have done this to Cody. The detectives, however, couldn't ignore some red flags. For one, there were no signs of forced entry into the condo, which meant the killer was likely someone Cody knew. Lily also had some bruises on her arms and a small cut on her hand. When asked about them, she said they were from an unrelated accident the day before, but the explanation seemed vague. O'Brien, who had a naturally suspicious personality, found her demeanor odd, especially given the violent nature of the crime. As the questioning continued, the tension in the room grew. The detectives mentioned rumors about an affair between Lily and Rachel, Cotty's younger sister. After a moment of hesitation, Lily admitted to the sexual relationship. She explained that the affair had started before her marriage to Cotty and had continued even after they weighed. In fact, she admitted she had sex with Rachel the afternoon before Cotty's death. This revelation added layers of complexity to the situation, suggesting deep emotional connections intertwined with the turmoil of the love triangle. Lily described her feelings for both Cotty and Rachel, emphasizing the passion and intense sexual fireworks she shared with Rachel, which contrasted with the stability and calm Cotty provided. The detectives noted the significant implications of this admission, recognizing that Lily's secret sexual relationship could have played a critical role in the confrontation that led to Cotty's death. Further complicating matters was the lack of background information on Lily. Police struggled to find any records of her existence before 2015. She had told Cotty and his friends that she was from Calgary, Canada, but there were no official documents to support this claim. This led detectives to question whether she might be hiding something from her past, and whether that could have played a role in the crime. Despite Lily's cooperation, the police couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. They pressed her on her relationship with Cotty, asking about any recent arguments or tensions between them. Lily admitted they had been arguing about finances and other personal issues, but she denied any involvement in Cotty's death. Still, the investigation was just beginning, and while Lily wasn't immediately arrested, she remained a person of interest. Detectives would continue to dig deeper into Lily's past and their relationship, searching for anything that might shed light on the violent act that took Cotty's life. The second person the police questioned was Rachel McAllister, Cotty's younger sister. Rachel, 26, was a bartender at a trendy downtown San Jose bar called the Fountain Tap. She was also an aspiring singer, known for performing Taylor Swift songs at local open mic nights. With a rebellious personality and a love for the Bay Area's nightlife scene, Rachel was close to Cotty but had a complicated relationship with him. Her fiery temper and history of drug and alcohol use made her a suspect almost immediately. Rachel had also been involved in a secret relationship with Lily before Cotty had ever met her, a fact that only came to light during the investigation. She had continued her affair with Lily even after Cotty and Lily got married, creating a tangled web of sex and deceit. The sexual relationship between the two women had been passionate but full of tension, and detectives believed this could be a possible motive for Rachel to harm her brother. If Cotty found out about the affair, it could have created significant conflict. Rachel was brought in for questioning on the afternoon of November 19, 2019, less than 10 days before Thanksgiving. From the moment she sat down, it was clear she wasn't handling the interrogation well. Her frustration showed as she angrily denied any involvement in her brother's death. She told Detective O'Brien that she loved Cotty despite their differences and insisted she would never hurt him. However, her body language told a different story. She shifted nervously in her seat, avoiding eye contact, and became defensive when asked about her ongoing affair with Lily. The detectives pressed Rachel on her whereabouts the night of the murder. She claimed she was working late at the Fountain Tap and then went home to do some pot, but she had no solid alibi to back her up. O'Brien also questioned her about Duke Coleman Kang, her ex-boyfriend with a violent past, who had been seen near Cotty's condo around the time of the murder. Rachel admitted she hadn't spoken to Duke in months, but became noticeably tense when his name was mentioned. As police continued to dig into Rachel's personal life, they uncovered her struggles with substance abuse and her financial troubles, which raised more suspicion. Detectives theorized that Rachel's jealousy of Cotty's success, combined with the stress of her affair with Lily, could have driven her to a breaking point. While there was no physical evidence directly linking Rachel to the crime, her tumultuous relationship with both Cotty and Lily made her a prime suspect in the investigation. The third person police investigated was David Duke Coleman Kang, a 42-year-old felon with a long history of violent crime. Duke had been in and out of prison for various offenses, including drug dealing and assault. He was well known to law enforcement in San Jose, especially around the rougher areas like East Side, where criminal activity was more frequent. Duke's rough reputation and ties to Rachel McAllister immediately put him on the police's radar after Cotty's murder. Duke had been spotted near Cotty's upscale condo the night of the murder. A neighbor reported seeing him standing near the building's parking lot around 10:30 p.m., smoking a blunt. This sighting raised alarm bells for the investigators, as Duke was known to have had a volatile relationship with Rachel in the past. Duke and Rachel had broken up months before, but their relationship had been filled with arguments, often fueled by drugs and alcohol. Police wondered if Duke, driven by jealousy or anger, could have been looking for Rachel and ended up at Cotty's place instead. On November 21, 2019, Duke was picked up by police for questioning. He was calm, almost indifferent, as Detective O'Brien and his partner, Detective Chang, brought him into the station. Dressed in a worn leather jacket and jeans, Duke appeared unaffected by the seriousness of the situation. When asked about his presence near Cotty's building the night of the murder, Duke claimed he was in the area to sexually menace a guy about unpaid drug payments, which he said never happened. He insisted he had nothing to do with Cotty's death and claimed he barely knew Cotty at all. Duke's criminal record, however, made the detectives suspicious. His involvement in drug-related activities and his connection to Rachel created a possible motive. Could Duke have been looking to settle a score or intimidate someone? And things went horribly wrong. Police pressed him hard on whether his presence was related to Rachel or if there had been a confrontation that led to Cody's death. Duke denied it all, maintaining that he hadn't even gone inside the building that night. Despite Duke's criminal past, police had no solid evidence tying him to the crime. His alibi, though flimsy, wasn't easy to disprove. There were no signs that Duke had entered the condo or been involved in the violent altercation that led to Cody's death. While Duke remained a person of interest due to his connection with Rachel and his proximity to the scene, police knew they needed more concrete evidence to pursue him further. On November 24, 2019, nearly a week after Cody McAllister's murder, the San Jose Police Department received a critical break in the case. The weather that Sunday was chilly, with light rain falling across the city, creating a somber mood around the investigation. Detectives O'Brien and Richards were reviewing evidence at the station when a forensic technician approached them with something unusual. While combing through Lily McAllister's MacBook, the tech had uncovered several hidden files containing medical documents, including one that revealed a secret Cody had possibly just discovered before his death. Lily McAllister was born a man and had undergone gender transition surgery years earlier in Canada. The documents, dating back to 2015, showed that Lily had once been a man known as Lyle Dubchenko. This revelation was shocking not only because of the secret itself, but also because Lily had kept this part of her past completely hidden from Cody, who likely had no idea when they married. As police dug deeper, they also uncovered another bombshell. Before her transition, Lily, as Lyle, had actually been married to Cody's sister, Rachel McAllister, while living in Calgary. This tangled web of relationships immediately added a new layer of complexity to the case. Investigators pieced together a possible scenario. Cody had been browsing the laptop when he stumbled upon these documents. Already dealing with tension in his marriage, this discovery likely pushed him over the edge, leading to a violent confrontation with Lily on the night of his murder. With this new evidence, police interviewed Lily again, this time focusing on her past. When confronted with the documents, Lily admitted that Cody had discovered her secret that evening, leading to a heated argument. But according to Lily, while Cody was furious and felt utterly betrayed, not only because she had kept her transition hidden, but also because of her previous marriage to his sister, the argument did not turn violent. Lily claimed she had tried to calm Cody down, but the argument had quickly escalated until Cody left the apartment to calm down. The discovery of this new information was a massive turning point in the investigation. Detectives now believe that Cody's murder was directly tied to his discovery of Lily's past and the emotional turmoil it caused. The police re-examined the crime scene with this new understanding, hoping to find more evidence to support their theory. They also began speaking to Rachel McAllister again, to clarify her knowledge of Lily's history and how much she had told her brother. This new evidence gave police a clearer motive and pushed Lily to the top of their list of suspects. On the evening of November 26, 2019, after days of investigation, the San Jose Police Department officially identified Lily McAllister as Cody McAllister's killer. Following the discovery of hidden medical documents revealing Lily's past as a transgender woman and her former marriage to Cody's sister, Rachel, police concluded that Cody had discovered these secrets shortly before his murder. This realization had led to a violent argument in the couple's upscale condo, culminating in Cody's stabbing death. Lily McAllister, 32, had always been an enigmatic figure in the local creative scene. Known for her unique fashion designs and soft-spoken demeanor, she had lived a quiet, seemingly private life, since arriving in California a few years earlier. But her secret past as Lyle Dubchenko, a man who transitioned in Canada, had remained hidden, even from Cody, her husband of only a few months. When Cody uncovered this information, his sense of betrayal and rage likely led to the violent altercation that ended his life. Police believed that after Cody confronted Lily, the argument quickly spiraled out of control. In a desperate attempt to protect herself from Cody's aggression, Lily had grabbed a kitchen knife during the struggle and stabbed him in the chest. While Lily would later claim she acted in self-defense, detectives found the situation far more complex, given the intense emotional layers of the relationship and the secrets that had just come to light. On November 27, 2019, police arrived at Lily's condo to arrest her. It was a quiet afternoon, and Lily was at home, still reeling from the events of the past few days. When officers knocked on her door, she didn't seem surprised. According to police reports, Lily was calm as they informed her of the charges, stating that she had expected this outcome. Her demeanor remained controlled as they handcuffed her and led her to the patrol car. Meanwhile, Cody's family, especially his parents and sister Rachel, were devastated by the arrest. Rachel's marriage and subsequent sexual relationship with Lily, both before and after her transition, added another layer of heartbreak to an already tragic situation. The family had struggled to come to terms with the tangled web of secrets and betrayals that had led to Cody's death. Still, the arrest brought some closure to their grief, knowing that justice might be served. With Lily in custody, police had their suspect, and the focus turned to the upcoming trial. The case had quickly become quietly talked about in social media, with headlines speculating about Lily's past and the shocking circumstances surrounding Cody's murder. The trial of Lily McAllister for the murder of her husband Cody began in early February 2020. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Mark Harding, a 45-year-old with a no-nonsense reputation, argued that Lily's actions were deliberate. Harding highlighted the evidence found on Cody's laptop and suggested that the discovery of Lily's transgender identity and her prior relationship with Cody's sister, Rachel, was the final trigger for the fatal confrontation. He painted a picture of premeditation, claiming Lily had gone to great lengths to hide her past, which exploded in violence when Cody learned the truth. On the defense side, attorney Sarah Jane Lobison, 39, took the lead. Known for her empathetic yet sharp style, Lobison claimed that Lily had acted in self-defense. She explained that Cody had become enraged after discovering Lily's documents and began a physical altercation that left Lily no choice but to protect herself. Lobison painted a sympathetic image of Lily, describing her difficult life as a transgender woman and the fear she lived with, particularly from rejection by people close to her. She urged the jury to consider Lily's mental state during the argument. Throughout the trial, Cody's family attended every session. His parents sat in the courtroom daily, devastated by the loss of their son, Rachel McAllister, caught in the middle of the tangled relationships, seen torn, quietly supporting her family but struggling with her complicated feelings about Lily. The emotional weight of the case was evident in their faces as both sides made their arguments. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 2 days. In the end, Lily was convicted of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 20 years in prison, a decision that some of Cody's family felt was too lenient, given the tragic loss of his life. The defense team had hoped for a lesser charge of manslaughter, but the jury sided with the prosecution's view that Lily's actions, while not premeditated, were far more than just self-defense. The trial left a deep emotional scar on both Cody's family and those in the local community who had followed the case closely through media outlets like the San Jose Mercury News. In the end, justice was served, but the pain of Cody's death lingered. After Lily McAllister's trial in February 2020, the lives of those involved changed significantly. Lily was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the murder of her husband, Cody McAllister. She was sent to Valley State Prison in Chowchilla, California, where she faced significant challenges as a transgender woman in a male prison environment. While some inmates were supportive, others were not, and she had to navigate a complex social landscape. In prison, she found support from some inmates and began participating in educational programs. She focused on bettering herself through classes in art and writing, hoping to share her story one day. However, she also faced discrimination from others, making her time difficult. Rachel McAllister, Cody's younger sister, struggled with the aftermath of the trial. She had been deeply affected by her brother's death and her relationship with Lily. As a local bartender in San Jose, Rachel continued to pursue her dream of becoming a singer. She often performed at small venues around the city, trying to channel her grief into her music. In early 2020, she began therapy to help process her emotions, working through her complicated feelings of loss and betrayal. Rachel also spoke publicly about her experiences on her TikTok channel, sharing her story to raise awareness about domestic violence and mental health. Duke Coleman Kang, Lily's ex-boyfriend, who had initially been a suspect in Cuddy's murder, faced his own troubles. With a history of violent crime and drug use, Duke continued to struggle with addiction after the trial. Reports indicated that he was arrested again in 2020 for drug possession in Sandoz. He was sentenced to rehabilitation, where he attempted to turn his life around by becoming a youth pastor in Nashville. Duke's past haunted him, but he aimed to break the cycle of his previous choices. As time passed, Cuddy's family remained dedicated to honoring his memory. They established a charity focusing on mental health support, hoping to help others affected by violence. Through their efforts, they found some solace and a way to keep Cuddy's spirit alive. Emily Treacle, a 34-year-old marketing manager from Greenville, South Carolina, was a force to be reckoned with in September of 2009. Known for her outgoing personality and infectious laughter, she charmed everyone she met. Despite her professional success, Emily always prioritized her loved ones, especially her son Lawson, 14. Her dedication to balancing her career and family made her a beloved figure among her family and friends. In September of 2009, Emily's life was at its peak. She had recently landed a prestigious position at a renowned marketing firm, Greenville Marketing Solutions, where she spearheaded successful campaigns for well-known brands like Apple, Nike, and Coca-Cola. Her colleagues described her as a creative genius, always coming up with innovative ideas that captivated audiences. Outside of work, Emily was an active member of her community. She volunteered at the local animal shelter, where she rescued and fostered numerous stray animals. Her love for animals was evident in her home, which was filled with the joyful barks and woofs of her beloved golden retriever, Joseph Clay Powell. Emily's social life was vibrant as well. She was a regular at the Trinity coffee shop, Cafe Mocha, where she would meet with friends to discuss the latest gossip or exchange book recommendations. Her favorite pastime was attending live music events, and she often frequented the popular music venue, the Blue Note, where she would dance the night away with her friends. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect life, darkness lurked. Emily's marriage to her husband, Adam Treacle, was not as idyllic as it appeared. Friends and family had noticed the strain in their relationship, with arguments becoming more frequent and intense, especially about Lawson, who was Emily's son from a previous relationship. Despite their troubles, Emily remained fiercely loyal to Adam, determined to make their marriage work. Little did Emily know that her loyalty would lead to her untimely demise. As we delve deeper into this chilling murder investigation, we will uncover the shocking secrets and hidden motives that ultimately led to Emily's tragic end. On a warm September evening in 2009, tragedy struck the tranquil town of Greenville, South Carolina. The peaceful atmosphere was shattered by the sound of 6 gunshots that pierced the air, leaving the community in shock and disbelief. The victim, Emily Treacle, a 34-year-old marketing manager, met her untimely demise while innocently waiting in her car at a drive-thru Burger King. The fateful scene was discovered by a concerned citizen named Patty Bell Gomery, who happened to be passing by at that very moment. As she glanced towards Emily's vehicle, her eyes were immediately drawn to the lifeless figure slumped behind the wheel. The sight sent a wave of fear and disbelief coursing through her veins, leaving her trembling with apprehension. Without wasting a moment, Patty Bell Gomery swiftly dialed 911, her voice quivering as he relayed the harrowing details to the emergency operator. Her words were laden with a mix of shock and horror as she described the grisly tableau that had unfolded before his eyes. The operator, well-versed in handling such distressing calls, calmly guided Patty Bell through the necessary steps while assuring him that help was on the way. As the minutes ticked by, Patty Bell's mind raced, trying to make sense of the senseless violence that had befallen this quiet corner of Greenville. The once serene neighborhood now buzzed with the presence of law enforcement officers, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow on the surrounding area. News vans from local media outlets descended upon the scene, eager to capture every detail of this shocking crime. As the investigation unfolded, officers meticulously combed through the area, collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The drive-thru Burger King, now a haunting backdrop to this heinous act, became a focal point for detectives seeking any clues that might shed light on the identity of the perpetrator. Meanwhile, news of Emily's tragic death spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community. Friends, family, and colleagues were left reeling from the loss of a vibrant and beloved individual. The shockwaves of this crime reverberated far beyond the boundaries of Greenville, leaving a lasting impact on all who heard the news. The Greenville Police Department swiftly responded to the distress call that came in on that fateful September evening in 2009. Detectives Erica Leach and JoJo Brownlee, both seasoned investigators with a reputation for their meticulous approach, took charge of the investigation. Upon arriving at the scene, the detectives were met with a chilling sight. Emily Treacle's car, a silver Chevrolet Impala, was parked near the drive-thru of a Burger King. The car itself was stained with blood, a grim reminder of the violence that had unfolded just moments earlier. Detective Leach, a woman of unwavering determination, meticulously combed through the vehicle, searching for any clues that could shed light on the identity of the killer. She carefully examined the seats, noting the presence of a small tear in the upholstery, which could potentially be a valuable piece of evidence. Detective Brownlee, known for his keen eye for detail, focused his attention on the exterior of the car, inspecting it for any signs of forced entry or tampering. As the investigation progressed, the detectives discovered a discarded gun near the crime scene. The weapon, a Glock 17, was a popular choice among law enforcement agencies at the time. Its presence raised questions about who the perpetrator could be and what their motive might have been. The detectives carefully bagged the gun, ensuring that it would be preserved as evidence for further analysis. As the investigation unfolded, news of Emily Treacle's murder spread throughout the community, sending shockwaves through Greenville and beyond. Local news outlets, such as the Greenville News and WYFF News 4, covered the story extensively, urging anyone with information to come forward and assist the police in their search for justice. Adam Treacle, a 36-year-old unemployed accountant, found himself thrust into the spotlight as the prime suspect in the shocking murder of his wife, Emily Treacle. The investigation took a chilling turn as detectives delved into the depths of Adam's troubled mind, searching for any clues that could link him to the crime. In the aftermath of the Great Recession, Adam had fallen victim to the economic turmoil that plagued the nation. The loss of his job as an accountant had left him feeling emasculated and overshadowed by his successful wife. Friends and neighbors whispered about the resentment that simmered beneath Adam's calm facade. Detectives Erica Leach and JoJo Brownlee, seasoned professionals with a reputation for their meticulous approach, meticulously combed through Adam's life, searching for any hint of a motive. They discovered a series of incriminating text messages exchanged between Adam and an unknown number, suggesting a secret affair. The detectives traced the number to a burner phone, a device commonly used by individuals seeking to conceal their illicit activities. Further investigation revealed that Adam had recently taken out a life insurance policy on Emily, a fact that raised eyebrows and fueled suspicions. The policy, worth a staggering $1 million, would have provided Adam with a substantial financial windfall in the event of Emily's untimely demise. The timing of this policy, coinciding with Adam's growing resentment towards his wife's success, raised red flags within the investigative team. As the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a web of lies and deceit. Adam had been secretly meeting with a divorce attorney, fueling speculation that he was planning to end his marriage and secure a substantial settlement. The motive for murder became increasingly clear. Adam stood to gain financially from Emily's death, and his actions leading up to that fateful September evening hinted at a plan in motion. The investigation continued, with detectives meticulously analyzing surveillance footage from nearby establishments, hoping to catch a glimpse of Adam's movements on the night of the murder. They also interviewed friends and acquaintances, piecing together a timeline of events leading up to Emily's tragic end. Sarah Bezelrand, a co-worker of Emily Treacle, emerged as a person of interest in the perplexing murder investigation. Originally from Pretoria, South Africa, Sarah's ambitious nature and competitive spirit made her a formidable presence in the workplace. However, behind closed doors, her relationship with Emily took a more intimate and sexual turn. Police theorized Sarah's motive for murder could be traced back to the breakup of her torrid affair with Emily. As September of 2009 unfolded, tensions between the two women escalated, fueled by jealousy and a desire for professional advancement. Sarah saw Emily as a rival, a formidable obstacle standing in the way of her own career aspirations. The police had also been diligently investigating the possibility that Sarah manipulated Adam Treacle, Emily's husband, into carrying out the heinous act. They explored the theory that Sarah, driven by her desperation to secure a promotion and eliminate her ex-lover, devised a plan to involve Adam in the murder plot. During the interrogation, Sarah maintained a calm facade, skillfully concealing her true intentions behind an empty smile. She denied any involvement in Emily's death, insisting that she had moved on from their tumultuous relationship. However, detectives Erica Leach and JoJo Brownlee remained vigilant, aware of the potential danger lurking beneath Sarah's composed exterior. As the investigation delves deeper into the lives of Sarah and Adam, the detectives uncovered a web of secrets and hidden desires. September of 2009 was a time of great uncertainty, with the lingering effects of the Great Recession casting a shadow over the nation. It was a period when individuals, like Sarah and Adam, found themselves grappling with their own personal frustrations and disappointments. As the investigation unfolded, the detectives were determined to uncover the truth behind Emily Treacle's tragic demise. The clock was ticking, and the stakes were high. Would they be able to untangle the web of deceit and betrayal that surrounds this chilling murder? Only time would tell. In the quiet town of Greenville, South Carolina, the Treacle family tragedy unfolded like a scene from a primetime crime drama. 14-year-old Lawson Treacle found himself at the center of a police investigation that gripped the community. The young teen, known for his curiosity and sometimes intrusive nature, was the son of the victim, Emily Treacle, and stepson to the prime suspect, Adam Treacle. Lawson, a student at the local middle school, was often seen skateboarding around the neighborhood, headphones on, lost in his own world. His friends described him as a smart kid, always with his nose in a book or working on his latest science project. But beneath the surface, Lawson harbored deep resentment towards his stepfather, Adam, whom he saw as an intruder in the close bond he shared with his mother. During the interrogation, Lawson's demeanor was a mix of teenage defiance and vulnerability. He spoke of his mother with warmth, recalling how she would cheer the loudest at his soccer games and was always there to help with homework. When asked about Adam, Lawson's tone shifted. He described feeling like an outsider when Adam entered their lives, a sentiment that only grew over time. Detectives probed for any sign of Lawson's involvement or knowledge of the crime. They questioned him about the gun found at the scene, but Lawson insisted he had never seen it before. He recounted his last conversation with his mother, a typical exchange about weekend plans and a reminder to do his chores. The interrogation revealed a troubled relationship between Lawson and Adam, but no evidence to suggest Lawson's involvement in the crime. The detectives concluded that the young teen, while troubled by family dynamics, was not capable of such violence. Instead, they turned their attention back to the other suspects, with Adam Treacle and Sarah Bezelrand remaining at the forefront of the investigation. As the case unfolded, the community rallied around Lawson, offering support and condolences. The story of the Treacle family tragedy served as a stark reminder of the complexities of family relationships and the impact of loss on a small town. Lawson, once a suspect, was now seen as a young boy who had lost his mother too soon, a victim of circumstances beyond his control. In the quiet city of Greenville, South Carolina, the case of Emily Treacle's murder had gripped the community with fear and uncertainty. But as the autumn leaves began to turn, signaling the change of seasons in the fall of 2009, a breakthrough emerged in the investigation that would bring a chilling resolution to the mystery. The Greenville Police Department, led by detectives Erica Leach and JoJo Brownlee, had been tirelessly piecing together the puzzle of Emily's untimely death. The evidence, meticulously gathered from the crime scene at the Burger King drive-thru, pointed to one individual, Adam Treacle, Emily's own husband. Adam, a 36-year-old unemployed accountant, had found himself jobless amidst the Great Recession, a time when financial turmoil was felt across the nation. His wife's success as a marketing manager only deepened his sense of inadequacy and resentment. It was this toxic mix of jealousy and financial desperation that detectives believe drove Adam to commit the unthinkable. On the fateful night of September 17th, Adam executed his plan. While Emily sat in her car while in line at the Burger King drive-thru, he approached under the cover of darkness and fired 6 shots, ending her life in a matter of seconds. The gun, a .38 caliber revolver, a stark symbol of his guilt, was found discarded near the scene, its serial number traced back to Adam. The detectives, armed with this evidence, confronted Adam during a tense interrogation. He sat across from them, his face a mask of stoic calm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. As the questions grew more pointed, his facade began to crumble. The evidence was irrefutable, and Adam's silence spoke volumes. On September 28th, Adam Treacle's fate was sealed. He was arrested and charged with the murder of Emily Treacle. The news of his arrest spread quickly, making headlines in local papers and becoming the talk of the town. As Adam was led away in handcuffs, the community of Greenville breathed a collective sigh of relief. The man who had walked among them, harboring a dark secret, was now behind bars. Emily's family, though still mourning the loss of their vibrant loved one, found solace in the fact that justice was being served. In the fall of 2009, a real-life drama unfolded in Greenville, South Carolina. The trial of Adam Treacle, accused of the cold-blooded murder of his wife Emily, shot dead in a Burger King drive-thru, captured the attention of the local community and beyond. The courtroom was tense as prosecutor Zara Mitchell laid out the case against Adam. She painted a picture of a man overwhelmed by jealousy, who meticulously planned the murder of his successful wife to collect her life insurance. The evidence was compelling: financial records, the testimony of co-workers, and the murder weapon linked to Adam. Defense attorney Elodie Campbell fought to create doubt, suggesting that the evidence was circumstantial and that Adam was a loving husband incapable of such a crime. However, the jury was not swayed. They had heard the 911 call, seen the crime scene photos, and now they delivered their verdict: guilty. The decision came down on a day when the MTV Video Music Awards were making headlines, but for the people of Greenville, this local news was far more significant. The courtroom was silent, save for the sound of Emily's family softly crying as the judge pronounced the sentence. Life without parole. Adam Treacle's face, once stoic, now showed the gravity of his situation. He had been unmasked not as the quiet, unemployed accountant, but as a murderer driven by envy. The trial, which had been the subject of local news segments and newspaper articles, was over. As the gavel fell, the community reflected on the tragedy. Emily Treacle, remembered for her vibrant personality and dedication to her family, had become a symbol of a life taken too soon. The verdict offered closure to some, but for others, it was a reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of human emotion. The case of the state versus Adam Treacle would be remembered not just for its outcome, but for the conversations it sparked about love, jealousy, and justice. And as the leaves began to change color, signaling the end of November, the people of Greenville would move forward, carrying with them the memory of the trial that had captivated their town. The town of Greenville, South Carolina, was slowly healing from the wounds of a tragedy that had shaken its core. The trial of Adam Treacle for the murder of his wife, Emily, had concluded, leaving a community to grapple with the aftermath. Adam Treacle, now a convicted murderer, faced a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The verdict, delivered on a day when the Toronto International Film Festival celebrated cinematic achievements, marked the end of his freedom. He was confined to a cell, his only company the ghosts of his past actions. Sarah Bezelrand, Emily's former lover and co-worker, also faced the consequences of her involvement. Though not convicted, her reputation was tarnished, her career prospects dimmed. She returned to her native South Africa, but whispers followed her every move, her new colleagues viewing her with suspicion and unease. The community of Greenville, once bustling with the excitement of the upcoming football season and the release of new video games, now found itself in a somber state. The local Burger King, the site of Emily's murder, became a grim landmark, a place many avoided, its drive-thru a reminder of the night that changed everything. For Lawson, the teenage son left without a mother, life was a series of adjustments. He returned to school, his classmates tiptoeing around the subject of his loss. Football games and school dances were no longer just rites of passage. They were moments tinged with the absence of his mother's cheering presence. The treacle case was a stark reminder of the complexities of human emotions and the consequences of actions driven by jealousy and greed. As Greenville looked to the future, the community held onto the hope that such darkness would never again touch their lives. Greenville, South Carolina, will forever bear the scars of this twisted murder investigation. The tragic death of Emily Treacle shattered the illusion of safety in this quiet suburban community. Through the tireless efforts of the police and the resilience of Emily's loved ones, justice was served, but the scars left behind will never truly fade away.